Observations for Our Time. Volume 3, Coming Home, Returning for His People. Chapter 1, The Second Coming, Celebrating the Torah with Yah's Mashiach. Let's open the third volume of Observations for Our Time, where Yahowah's beloved began, with the first 7 Mizmor, Psalms. From there, we will turn to Yahowah's Sermon on the Mount as it is presented in the heart of the Torah. Then let's pick up the prophetic story of Yisrael in Yirmiyah 48 through 51. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's jump right in. As music for my heart, the lyrics of God's beloved Son begin with Yahowah's hand upon the word, Asher, and thus Asheri, that brought us to this place. This means that Daud began his relationship with God and demonstrated his inclination to write about it with the very same word that brought us to Yahowah. Joyful and blessed Asheri, fortunate and happy in the relationship, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life, providing the proper place to stand and live is the individual who, as a result of the relationship Asher, who is elated and favored through the association, taking the proper strides to live a productive, prosperous, blessed, and joyful life, does not walk lo halak, does not journey through life in the counsel of those who are religious and incorrect bar Eitzar Asher, in the advice of a con man advocating religious schemes, in the criminal promotion by a revolting authority figure of idolatrous images, with the plan causing those who believe in it to be unjust, immoral, and condemned, does not stand lo amad, is not present, does not engage, endure, nor remain in the way bar Derek, in the path of those who are on chatter, of those who should be condemned for leading people astray and have missed their way, neither sits or dwells lo yashab, neither is established or seated, neither inhabits or settles down in the place, company, or assembly bar moshab, in the congregation or representation, in the dwelling or household, in the seat or position of power of a ruling socio-religious influence of those who babble, confounding by scoffing and ridiculing lets, of those who presumptuously interpret and arrogantly deride, mock, and scorn, Mizmor 1, but instead Qiyam, but by contrast, genuinely and honestly he desires and delights in Chefetz Hu, he takes pleasure in and enjoys Yahowah's Torah, teaching, instruction, direction, and guidance, and on his Torah teaching and guidance Wabar Torah Hu, and upon his source from which direction and instruction flow he meditates, giving serious thought and consideration to the information Haggah, he reads and ponders, thinking intently, then decides and speaks Kalam perfect, actually and continually developing a genuine and literal relationship between himself and the Torah with ongoing implications day and night. Yahowah Layla. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1, 1 through 2. And we ponder the expansive implications of what we just read, we find ourselves in a similar situation to Taruah, trumpets, where we are encouraged to express ourselves by shouting for joy and screaming out an alarm all at the same time. But let's do them in the proper order. Daud began his literary love affair with Yahowah celebrating the same word, Asher, that brought us together 18 years ago. Asher defines the proper path to the kind of relationship Yahowah envisioned while also expressing its purpose. Those who celebrate Asher in conjunction with Yah enjoy the beneficial blessings of the relationship, they are elated for having been favored through this association, having taken the proper strides to live a productive, prosperous, and joy-filled life. Asher is the correct, albeit narrow and restrictive, straightforward path which leads to abundant life and which gives every aspect of life meaning. Those of us who, like Daud, David, become God's beloved sons and daughters, do so by making an Asher-like connection between Yahowah and his Torah, literally walking to one directly through the other. As for the alarm, how is it possible that there are 2.5 billion Christians in light of the first sentence of the first psalm? Daud opened his prophetic repertoire firing a broadside that blew right through Christianity's keel, killing Shaul, question him, Paul while shattering everything he wrote. It has become as it once was Daud versus Shaul, God versus the adversary. Unwilling to listen to the God who created men in his image, this is how the men who created gods in their image failed those who followed them. It explains why those who clamored to express their support for King Shaul would die estranged from Yahowah and why those who believe the self-proclaimed apostle Shaul have suffered the same fate. The first sentence in the first psalm presents a 1-2 punch to the gut of the faithful. First, do not walk in the counsel of someone who is religious, and thus incorrect. Do not stand with a person who is wrong and who leads people astray. And neither sit nor dwell in the place, company, or congregation of an individual who causes those who believe him to babble, confounding others through their presumptuous interpretations and derisive ridicule. And secondarily, after disassociating from such an individual or institution, desire and delight in Yahowah's Torah teaching, giving his Torah guidance serious thought and consideration day and night. This is the antithesis on both aspects of the beloved's inspired advice, of what Akiba's Israelites, Pauline Christians, and Mohammedan Muslims have done. Before we draw the obvious conclusion, it should be noted that Eitzah, the deliberate counsel, advice, and determined purpose is that of a single individual, while those befuddled by him would be many, with Rasha, those who are religious and incorrect presented in the plural form. Therefore, based upon these two words, we are dealing with a con man acting as an authority figure advocating a religious scheme which draws from a pagan past and causes those who believe him to be condemned. Similarly, Derek, the way or path exposes the methods of one person while his victims, the chatter, those who are wrong and who have been led astray and have missed the way, would be many. Then reinforcing the fact that this is addressing one extraordinarily misleading and extremely influential individual who is negatively affecting the lives of all of those who allow themselves to be influenced by him, Moshab, the place, company, and assembly that this religious authority hails from, denotes a unique person while those he causes to let's engage in confounding babble and deriding ridicule are countless. Throughout this statement we are witnessing a single perpetrator with many victims. Set in the context of Daud's opening salvo, of the most beloved and articulate Yahweh, this is exposing and condemning a Israelite whose words would be harmful to Israel. In that it is the first thing he would write, Yahowah's favored son is telling us to avoid all association with one of history's most notorious Jews, Yahudem, leading us to an individual who provided the foundational religious texts of an astoundingly popular belief system. He would be incorrect by way of his incorporation of pagan mythologies, be wrong in that his message misses the way, leading countless people astray, or while causing his victims to babble, confounding the masses by presumptuously misinterpreting and arrogantly deriding Yahowah's Torah testimony. If we were to discount Daud's concluding advice, his celebration of the Torah at the completion of this sentence, then there would be three candidates: Paul, the subject of Acts and the author of 14 Christian New Testament books; Akiba, the father of rabbinical Judaism who caused the diaspora by promoting a false Messiah; and Muhammad, who was also a Jew, Allah's lone messenger, the pedophile rapist and mass-murdering terrorist and thief who first recited the regurgitated vomit known as the Quran. And while all three sponsored mountainous amounts of Rasha, chatter, and let's, only one of these men overtly hated Yahowah's Torah, only one unequivocally and blatantly predicated his religion on the renunciation of the Torah and sought to presumptuously deride and mock it out of existence. Shaul, question him, Paul. He is the man solely responsible for Luke, the hearsay account bearing the name of his publicist, the book of Acts which chronicles his life, his letter to the Romans where he claims its ruthless and pagan government was godly, to the Greeks in Ephesus where he attacked the disciple Yahowah, to Hebrews everywhere to reinforce his conspiracy against them, 2 epistles to the Anatolians in Asia Minor, the first to those living in Galatia where he condemned the disciple known as Peter, and the second to those living in Colossae, 2 epistles each to the Greeks in Corinth where he admitted to being demon-possessed, and Macedonians in Thessalonica where he viciously attacked those who rejected him, then errantly described and timed his rapture, along with personal letters to Philemon, Titus, and 2 to his lover, Timothy. Paul wrote 14 epistles and was responsible for 16 of the Christian New Testament's 27 books. Without a shred of evidence to validate his claims, Paul is nonetheless universally considered the greatest of the apostles by Christians for his labors, travels, sufferings, and voluminous nature of his writings. Of Paul's critics, J.W. McGarvey would write in his A Guide to Bible Study, it is sometimes said by unfriendly writers that Paul is the real author of Christianity, meaning that he made of that which was first preached a system which had not been intended by Christ. The charge is false, yet in the mind of the great head of the church it was allotted to Paul to elaborate, and to set forth much more fully than others did, the divine teachings of Jesus, and also to add much to the revelation of God's will which was first announced by Jesus. No man can, therefore, fully understand the doctrine of Christ without the aid of Paul's exposition of it. Overly honored 19th-century Restoration movement where the mythical Lord's Supper is mandated every Sunday and baptism is a condition for salvation, seminarian opposed to theological liberalism and higher criticism, but God is not the head of any church, only men like you can claim that title. There is no allocation of anything to Paul by Jesus, especially nothing to elaborate on which wasn't already set forth in the Torah, although rabbis are known to make similar claims. Surely appearances must be misleading because J.W. couldn't support the blasphemous religious notion that God was such an inadequate communicator he had to have inarticulate men interpret his message for it to be understood, and yet his summation clearly says no man can, therefore, fully understand the doctrine of Christ without the aid of Paul's exposition of it. So I suppose J.W. was imbecilic after all, because only a moron would believe that Paul's contradictions and verbal diarrhea conveyed more fully than others did the message of God, eclipsing the likes of Uoshe, Yahusha, Shamuel, Daud, Yeshaya, Yirmiah, Yauna, Ilya, Yochel, Zachariah, Daniel, and all of the genuine prophets who correctly conveyed Yahowah's own words. Mind you, if we wanted to be objective, Paul never once cited anything Jesus said or taught, and Jesus was not the first to announce the revelation of God's will on any subject, because that had all been done long ago in the Torah and prophets. Moreover, if God meant what JW claims to be so, why isn't there a single fulfilled prophecy in all of Paul's vociferous words to validate his authenticity? In actuality, Paul admitted his failure to validate anything he wrote, beginning the 11th chapter of Hebrews with "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." That is to say, I can't prove any of this and you cannot affirm it through evidence or reason, so just believe me. Faith, which is required of those who lack evidence and substance, is to be seen as the substitute for both. If you find yourself among those who are wont to discount the prophetic nature of the Mizmor and argue that Daud was addressing a more contemporaneous foe, the wannabe king of Yisrael, Shaul, be aware that King Shaul's renunciation of Yahowah's Torah was relatively trivial compared to the wannabe apostle Shaul. The king had an affinity for adding to it, not negating it. And even if it were to address Daud's rivalry with the first Shaul, almost every aspect of the king's ambition, life, and fate was prophetic of the self-proclaimed apostle. While the comparisons are countless, consider the fact that the Shauls are the only two individuals who admitted within the testimony of the Bible to being demon-possessed. Since Yahowah isn't prone to babble, since God inspired his beloved son, Daud, his favored leader, writer, and prophet, to commence his testimony to humankind with this sentence comprised of these words, it should be obvious that the individual and institution we are being warned about is Shaul. Question him, Paul and his religion, Christianity. This is a referendum between the Torah and the Christian New Testament. Counter to what Paul wrote, Yahowah's Torah is desirable and delightful, something that should be appreciated and adored. It is the antithesis of an antiquated and cruel taskmaster. It is a source of great joy and abundant life for those who meditate on its teaching, giving serious consideration to the information that can be gleaned from Yahowah's guidance. To ridicule Yahowah's Torah, replacing it with the Babel of the Bible, is, therefore, Rasha, W-R-O-N-G. Daud, David, Yahowah's beloved son, his Mashiach anointed, is telling all who would listen that no man or woman should walk, stand, or sit anywhere near Shaul. Question him, Paul or those his writings have beguiled. Christians. This is not a win-win scenario. There is no safe middle ground, no hint of compromise. It is black and white. We have absolute and irrefutable proof that Yahowah inspired Daud, David prophetically, that Daud is Yahowah's Mashiach anointed, that Daud was Yahowah's beloved son, that Yahowah chose Daud to lead his people in the past and has chosen to re-establish his kingdom in the future, that Daud was Torah observant and in fact loved Yahowah's Torah, and that Daud was Zadok. Right. We have absolute and irrefutable proof that Yahowah did not inspire Shaul, Paul prophetically, that Paul was not anointed by God, that Paul was not God's beloved son, that Paul was not chosen in the past nor selected in the future to lead Yahowah's people, and was actually opposed to them, and that Paul was wrong about everything, especially in his opposition to Yahowah's Torah. It is this simple. David is right and Shaul, Paul was wrong. They are opposites. There is no rational interpretation whereby both can be seen as truthful and correct. Since their message is the antithesis of one another, one of the two must be wrong. And it isn't David, since he has all of the credibility God can offer. But since Shaul, Paul has none, why do less than 7,000 people trust David while 2.5 billion believe Shaul, Paul? Paul was a miserable person and terrible writer who contradicted himself and God. He was egotistical and intolerant, abusive and sexist, dishonest and demon-possessed. With the possible exceptions of Akiba, Hadrian, Muhammad, and Hitler, Paul is the man most hated by God. Should you be on the fence, consider this. Daud means beloved, and Shaul is synonymous with chill. One sounds a lot more appealing than the other. Regardless of whether you have placed your faith in Paul, Akiba, or Muhammad, in a conspiracy advocating Nimrod promoting reptilian overlords and government plots, or in political reformers and humanist philosophers, you have not only been warned, you have been offered reconciliatory advice. Focus on the enjoyable and thoughtful aspects of Yahowah's Torah if you'd like to spend your eternity with Yahowah and Daud. Or, you can retain an affinity for Akiba and continue his diaspora, follow the example of a rapist and pedophile, a mass-murdering and demon-possessed terrorist and follow Muhammad into hell, or remain a Christian and endure forever with Shaul and chill, becoming personally acquainted with the thorn in his side. It's God's way, but your choice. This statement also serves to reinforce the covenant's lone prerequisite. We are asked to walk away from our country, from the Babel of religion and politics, and from our father's house and societal customs, all of which comprise man's way. It is only then that we can follow Daud's example and benefit from our God's beloved Torah teaching. Yahowah's son, his anointed past and future king, Yahowah's favorite prophet and songwriter, and arguably the most brilliant, articulate, and important individual in human history, began the first of what would become over 100 inspired and prophetic psalms, with joyful and blessed, fortunate and happy in the relationship, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life, providing the proper place to stand and live, is the individual who, as a result of the relationship, who is elated and favored through the association, taking the proper strides to live a productive, prosperous, blessed, and joyful life, does not walk nor journey through life in the counsel of those who are religious and incorrect, in the criminal promotion by a revolting authority figure of idolatrous images, does not stand and is not present in the way of those who wrong for leading people astray and who have missed the way, neither sits or dwells in the seat, company, or assembly, the congregation or position of power of the ruling socio-religious influence on those who babble, confounding by scoffing and ridiculing, of those who presumptuously interpret and arrogantly deride, one but instead and by contrast, genuinely and honestly he desires and delights in. Taking great pleasure in and enjoys Yahowah's Torah teaching, and on his Torah guidance he meditates, giving serious thought and consideration to the information, thinking intently before he decides and speaks day and night. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1, 2. So please explain why millions upon millions, billions upon billions, favor the Talmud, New Testament, and Quran to the Torah? Why is it that the majority of people chase after false gods by romping through man's religious rubbish? Why do so many Jews, Christians, and Muslims claim that the Torah was inspired by God and yet ignore it? Why are there so many conspiracies, so many religions, so many political schemes, and so many wars if there is but one God? Religion, from old to new, is incorrect, from big to small is wrong. Every single one, without exception, was conceived by an egocentric psychopath, by a man without empathy who feigned it to gain notoriety. They are all predicated and advanced through irrational deceptions. It's sad that so many have gotten all twisted up in the notion of a Messiah, a Christ, if you prefer the Greek corruption. Not only are they fixated on the wrong one, Yahusha versus Daud, Yahowah's only Mashiach, Melech, and Ben, his favored writer and singer, heir to the covenant and to the throne of Yisrael, the author of the Mizmor, psalm is more correctly known as the branch. This, not Messiah, continually and prolifically serves as Yahowah's most insightful and prolific metaphors. He wants us all to grow out of the foremost branches of the tree of lives, representing Yahusha and Daud, using what can be gleaned from a discriminating analysis of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to get from one to the other. As stems grafted in and growing out of the tree planted in the heart of Gan Eden, the garden of great joy, our lives become satisfying and productive. Then while he is like Hayakar, he is during the time comparable to Kal perfect a tree eats planted shuffle, transplanted, rooted, and flourishing near Al, close to an idyllic stream of flowing water Peleg Mame, the outpouring of the perfect amount of water through a channel cut open to the ideal size to cultivate plants and bring prosperity by way of a marvelous and wonderful supply of the source of life and cleansing, such that as a result of this beneficial relationship Asher, to reveal the straightforward and correct path to get the most out of life, he produces and bestows Nathan, he yields and gives Kal imperfect, actually and consistently presents his fruit Perihu, the result of what he produces, his harvest and descendants in his appointed time Ba'ethu, in the right season and proper occasion for him, from Ad, into perpetuity, continuously forevermore. The reference is subtle, but it is nonetheless there for the observant to find. The verb which lies at the heart of Torah is Yara. It speaks of the source from which teaching and guidance flow. In the transition from the Torah to the tree, the stream of cleansing and living waters is flowing out of Yahowah's Torah. That is why a tree making this Asher, relational connection is productive. While that is immensely positive, there is also a backhanded swipe at Paul in these words. They underscore why Yahusha spoke so vociferously about the nature of good and bad trees between his affirmations of the Torah during his instruction on the Mount. That long diatribe is best understood when viewed from this perspective. Just as Adam was asked to work in Eden's garden and Daud was asked to plant Zia's garden, we are encouraged to be fruitful and productive, to till the soil so that it is receptive, to pull the weeds that would choke out the desirable vegetation, to prune the vines so that they are healthy and strong, and to water the plants, always cognizant of the importance of removing any invasive species so that the good vines have unfettered access to the light. Its uplifting branches and foliage, while Ahu, his secondary extensions which grow up from the trunk of the tree and leaf out, will never wither, and he will never lack understanding. Lonable, will not shrivel up or lose their vitality, will never be played for a fool nor be held in contempt, he will never tire or become weary, will never lose heart nor be concerned regardless of the circumstances, because he will never be stupid and will always have the capacity to comprehend and understand Kalim perfect. In everything that he engages in wa kulli sa'a, with all he does, acts upon, and carries out, in the totality of his undertakings, considerable efforts, endeavors, and labor, Kalim perfect to show the way to the benefits of the relationship Asher, to bless by revealing the proper and straight path to walk to give life meaning. He will succeed and prosper Zalig, he will successfully accomplish the mission, he will be useful and thrive, he will win the argument and be acquitted, emerging correct and victorious. Hyphil imperfect, the subject continually causes the object to engage, with the one spoken about becoming ever more similar over time to the one speaking to him. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1:3. It is among Yahowah's favorite metaphors, going right back to the beginning of time with the fruitful and special trees growing in the garden and the 4 streams flowing out of it. Those who make these connections will never lack for understanding. Lo Nabil is wholly consistent with many of our own personal experiences. For example, every time I have ventured forth to convey the word of God, and that would include 10,000 radio interviews, I have never been concerned, much less afraid or rattled, and have never been played for a fool nor been held in contempt. I have prevailed with every argument made on behalf of Yahowah, no matter the foe or subject. And there is but one reason: the understanding I have derived from observing the Torah. Its teaching and guidance is the most powerful and compelling force in the universe. Yahowah's Torah enables us to succeed and prosper in everything that actually matters. This is not so loken, it is not true, nor even remotely similar with those who are incorrect Harasha, the invalid and unrighteous who wrong about and opposed to the standard, the wicked and immoral con men and criminals who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character, but who rather instead are like Kiemkar the chaff hamo, the useless and dried husks which is driven away Asher Nadaf Hu, and which for the benefit of the relationship is refuted by the spirit Nuvak, by the wind. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1:4. Have you ever considered grain, especially wheat, and how tiny the edible seed, or kernel, is compared to the roots which descend 6 feet, shoots up to 35 per plant, leaves averaging 15 per shoot, and husks? And yet, most of the plant withers up and dies, only to rot in the soil or be blown away by the winds. This then provides a frame of reference, at least for Israel, on the proportion of harvested souls versus those who are driven away and discarded. And it's likely to be 1,000 times worse for the rest of the world. As an interesting tidbit, all wheat planted by men have 6 pairs of chromosomes, matching the number God assigned to the men who genetically altered them. Also interesting, upon threshing, the chaff breaks up, releasing the grains. Thank God. Dowd is blunt. Yahowah found a man who wasn't afraid to tell the truth no matter whose feelings were hurt or whose faith was impugned in the process. Those who are wrong about God will not stand during judgment. They will be bowed down before God and the children of Israel. It is only those who, like Dowd and Yahusha, are Torah observant and affirming who, as a result, will stand upright, correct and vindicated before Yahowah. It is poetic justice: those who made those deemed less worthy bow down before them will in the end bow before those they offended. Therefore Al-Ken, based upon this reasoning, it is true that those who are incorrect Harasha, the invalid and unrighteous who wrong about and opposed to the standard, the wicked and immoral con men and criminals who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character will not stand upright. Lokum, will not be upright, rise up, be confirmed, nor is taught Kalim perfect during the judgment Bar HaMishpat, when justice is administrated, during the time disputes are resolved, when good judgment is practiced, nor are those who are on chatter, those who are culpable and will be condemned for leading people astray and who have missed the way in the enduring community of witnesses Bauda, in the gathering together of those who always remember the agreement and testify affirmatively regarding it, of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated Zadik, righteous, just, right, in accord with the standard, acquitted, and innocent. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1:5. Yahowah's covenant family is being addressed as Zida Zadik, the enduring community of correct witnesses. It is the fruit of the tree nourished by the teaching and guidance which flows out of the Torah. It is our highest calling. There is no job more rewarding or beneficial. That is not to say that we should be naive. The overwhelming majority of people will not only dismiss what we say on behalf of Yahowah, they will seek to bury the truth and those who share it under a barrage of false propositions and slanderous delusions. And yet, there are few things more courageous or compassionate, more liberating or uplifting, than pointing out all that is chatter, misleading and wrong with man's most popular myths, just as there is tremendous satisfaction in knowing what is right and in sharing that which is valid and vindicating. It is not only the right thing to do, when we are approached by that special individual who is open to the truth, who wants to listen and learn, we contribute to Yahowah's family and enrich eternity, for ourselves, for the new covenant member, and for our Heavenly Father. Beyond this, Dowd has answered a question I've long pondered about, a request I've made of Yah since the moment I came to expose and thus despise Muhammad and then Paul, Vespasian and then Hadrian, Akiba, Constantine, and Theodosius, Pope Pius XII and his Führer, Adolf Hitler. I not only want to be at their trials during this day of judgment, based upon what I've discovered about them, I'd like to serve as a prosecution witness. And now after translating these lyrics, I realize I didn't need to ask for permission or make the request because Dowd provided Yahowah's answer in this, the first Mizmor, Psalm. Those of us who have engaged in the covenant will not only be there standing with God as these exceedingly evil men bow down in judgment, we will serve as witnesses. Yahowah and his assemblage of spiritual messengers do not need our help and will appropriately expose and condemn these men without our testimony, but I'd nonetheless like to contribute and hold them all accountable for the countless souls they have led astray and crushed. It is what Yahowah has done throughout his Torah, prophets, and Psalms. It is what Dowd is doing. They have set the example we should strive to emulate. What follows reaffirms something else we have learned. Yahowah knows his children, and other than those bowing in judgment, he has no interest in the rest of humanity. Indeed, because Yahowah knows Yada, recognizes and acknowledges, is aware of and respects, is familiar with and is concerned about, understands and is very friendly with the way Derek, the manner and journey of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated, tzaddik, righteous, just, right, in accord with the standard, acquitted, and innocent, but while those whose path is incorrect, Derek Rasha, those whose way is invalid and opposed to the standard, whose journey leads others astray, will perish abad, will be blotted out and destroyed, exterminated and annihilated, vanishing and ceasing to exist, squandered and expelled. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 1, 6. If you want to be Yada, known by God, be tzaddik, right regarding God. And the only way to do that is to disassociate from those who are Rasha, wrong and hagar, meditate upon, giving serious thought and consideration to the information contained in Yahowah's Torah. And here, my friends, is a summation of the first Mizmor. Joyful and blessed, fortunate and happy in the relationship, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life, providing the proper place to stand and live, is the individual who, as a result of the relationship, who is elated and favored through the association, taking the proper strides to live a productive, prosperous, blessed, and joyful life, does not walk nor journey through life in the counsel of those who are religious and incorrect, in the criminal promotion by a revolting authority figure of idolatrous images, does not stand and is not present in the way of those who are wrong for leading people astray and who have missed the way, neither sits or dwells in the seat, company, or assembly, the congregation or position of power of the ruling socio-religious influence on those who babble, confounding by scoffing and ridiculing, of those who presumptuously interpret and arrogantly deride, one, but instead and by contrast, genuinely and honestly he desires and delights in. Taking great pleasure in and enjoys Yahowah's Torah teaching, and on his Torah guidance he meditates, giving serious thought and consideration to the information, thinking intently before he decides and speaks day and night. 1, 2. Its uplifting branches and foliage, even the smaller stems which grow up and leaf out, will never wither and he will never lack understanding. He will never be played for a fool nor be held in contempt, never lose heart nor be concerned regardless of the circumstances. He will never be considered foolish because he will always have the capacity to think and comprehend. In everything that he engages in, with all he does, acts upon, and endeavors to accomplish to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, he will succeed and prosper, successfully accomplishing the mission and consistently winning the argument, proven correct. 1, 3. This is not true, nor even remotely similar, with those who are incorrect, with those who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character, who rather instead will be like the chaff which is driven away and refuted by the Spirit. 1, 4. Therefore, based upon this reasoning, those who are misleading and incorrect, having led others astray by misrepresenting God's character, will not stand upright nor be restored during the judgment when justice is administrated, during this time when disputes will be resolved and good judgment encouraged, nor will it be so for those who are wrong and who have missed the way before the enduring community of witnesses of those who are upright and correct, valid and vindicated. 1, 5. Indeed, because Yahowah knows, he recognizes and acknowledges, and is aware of and respects, is familiar with and is concerned about, understands and is very friendly with the way and journey of those who are upright and correct, valid and vindicated, but those whose path is incorrect, Those whose way is opposed to the standard, and whose journey leads others astray, will perish and be blotted out, exterminated and expelled. Mizmor 1:6. Those who observe Yahowah's Torah are right, blessed with knowledge and understanding, joyful and productive, validated and vindicated, always correct on the issues which matter most, especially those regarding life or death. Those who believe man's mantras, whether they be political or religious, conspiratorial or militaristic, will remain confounded and confused. They will be judged and found to be wrong, exterminated and expelled. Yisrael, there is every reason to conclude that you are smart, with 0.2% of the world's population earning 30% of Nobel Prizes in the sciences. So how is it that you have collectively been on the wrong side of this simple equation for the past 3,000 years? Why is it that when Yahowah wanted someone to take his testimony seriously and then share it accurately and insightfully with you, he couldn't find a single Yahweh willing to step up and had to stoop to working with the Gawi? Sometimes, I am guided to things which, while always available and true, are perfect at the moment. The first word in the first psalm was a noteworthy example. But so is this next sentence, the first of the second Mizmor. Inexplicitly, and frustratingly, there is a greater propensity for people to believe in conspiracies today than there is to be overtly religious or political. The numbers are staggering, with the majority of people worldwide snookered by one hoax or another. For most, the lure of conspiracy is simple people are looking for someone to blame for their unfulfilling lives. The conspiratorial menace has grown so large and vocal, considerable numbers of scientific studies have been conducted to determine what prompts so many people to believe in and promote absurdly ridiculous notions. And what they have found is that there is but one common denominator among conspiratorialists. It isn't age, politics, ethnicity, nationality, no religion, but instead, they are all losers, unwilling to accept responsibility for their unsatisfactory and empty existence. They fault those deemed successful for controlling and inhibiting them. The most enduring and popular conspiracies, indeed the most deadly and delusional, purport that Jews control the world to the detriment of everyone else. Last week, the 19-year-old white supremacist and Christian, John Earnest, a member of the Escondido Presbyterian Church outside San Diego, murdered an unarmed elderly Jewish woman while attempting to kill her rabbi and then annihilate his entire congregation at the Chabad synagogue in Poway, California at the conclusion of Passover. While this worthless individual is just one among billions of anti-Semites, since his open letter coagulates so many of the lies that have been used to falsely slander Jews, it may be helpful to linger here a bit longer, and at the conclusion of Mizmor 2:1 we will consider his parting manifesto. While most conspiracy theorists are sufficiently anti-Semitic to endorse even the most obvious hoaxes, such as protocols of the Elders of Zion, they now use social media to promote an ever-growing and ever more ridiculous array of control fantasies. These include the absurd and discredited notion that the government wanted a justification to expand the military-industrial complex, so the elite perpetrated 9/11 and blamed Muslims. The conspiratorialist would have us believe that the government wants to control the population, so the cabal had their evil scientists engineer GMO foods, vaccines, fluoridated water, and chemtrails to poison everyone, including themselves, I suppose. The empowered wanted to confiscate the people's guns, so all of the mass shootings and bombings at schools, nightclubs, marathon races, and concerts were, if you believe them, staged by political actors. Then they say, because the empowered are different than the rest of us, elitists like Hillary Clinton turned the basement of a Washington area pizzeria into a child slavery and sex ring. There are even hundreds of millions who believe that the world's leading politicians are actually alien reptilian overlords, some who are convinced the Earth is flat and just 6,000 years old, many who think that the moon landings were faked and yet believe in UFOs, and others who conjecture that there is a mirror Earth, or Planet X, on the other side of the sun. There are those who deny the very existence of Israelites, suggesting that the race is long extinct. These same individuals then weave a web of lies to infer that they are the new Israel in a contemporary reenactment of the conspiracy of replacement theology. There is even a Hebrew roots movement where black Africans claim to be Yahudim. Yahowah wouldn't waste a moment on these wasted lives if it were not for three issues, all of which involve his people. First, the most prevalent and destructive conspiracy has been and remains blame the Jews. Paul originated and popularized the religious rendition of this game. Rome played it diabolically and destructively. The Catholic Church has perpetrated the longest-running, most pervasive and pathetic version, going so far as to say that Jews, not Romans, killed their God. Of course, Islamic jihadists have committed the deadliest and most insane interpretation of blame the Jews. The Third Reich accused them for the deplorable conditions imposed on the nation after losing the First World War and then executed the most sadistic application of this twisted scenario all the way to the final solution. It has been played out in Russia, the Ukraine, Poland, and Greece with their pogroms, then in Italy, Spain, France, England, and the Americas as a result of Christianity, and throughout Asia, Africa, and the Middle East as a result of Islam. It is played out in academia today to promote the myth of Palestine. And now it is rampant on the internet, flourishing worldwide in the artificial realm of social media. Based upon all we have learned, based upon the harm it has caused, based upon the nature of the perpetrators, there is nothing on the planet God despises more than anti-Semitic conspiracies. They lie in the crosshairs of Yahowah's most basic warning: I will curse those who curse thee. Second, conspiracies comprise the worst form of Babel. Their proponents not only ignore obvious and provable explanations, rejecting that which is valid and verifiable, they commingle all manner of deceptions, suggesting that the truth is found in a concoction of lies. They slander everyone who reveals that they are ridiculous and then reinforce their mythology by snickering among themselves. They are universally less receptive to evidence and reason than the most religious or political devotee. By clinging to such ridiculous babel, the conspiratorialists are prohibited from participating in the covenant. And by misleading hundreds, thousands, millions, and billions, they set themselves up to be judged and condemned, sentenced to chill. Anything capable of debilitating billions of souls, squandering their opportunity to understand, is worthy of God's righteous indignation. Third, promoting inane interpretations of readily explainable events under the title truthers has a tendency to repel thoughtful individuals while ensnaring fellow morons. And while idiots are easy to manipulate, the narcissists who stir the conspiracy pot desperately seek the kind of validation continents full of numbskulls cannot provide. So to give them the credibility needed to attract and hold ever more devotees, they need to mix their lies with enough truth to make the self-proclaimed saviors appear believable. And since nothing has ever been as credible as Yahowah's words, they are used as a veneer to glue the chaff of conspiracy together such that it will fool enough fools for the foolish to have a following. This is the secret to the success of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, Scientology, and even Western democracies. It is also found interwoven amongst all of the conspiracies promoted today. This isn't a remote or isolated problem. Conspiracy sites have latched onto my translations, transliterations, and insights, and have claimed them as their own, as if they wrote them. Then, after using them to draw in those actually searching for the meaning of life, they take the unsuspecting into its darkest and most twisted hole. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have been led to question these translations of Yahowah's words, even reject them, not on their merits, but instead based upon their incorporation into social media sites promoting the most absurd conspiracies. Worse, the gaggle of goons on these sites call themselves Covenant, they use Yahowah's name, and weave insights that are known only through these books through their texts and threads. And they are rude, abusive, arrogant, delusional, and obnoxious, always picking fights. If there were hundreds of sites and audio programs devoted to accurately translating Yahowah's words and freely sharing the insights derived from them, this problem would be less catastrophic, but because they are few, and most are related to these translations, the conspiratorialists have enraged the one calling his people home. He is so angry, he even predicted their influence by referring to them. It begins with Walud Derek Huberzahu, and so the devious nut who misleads and perverts in his despicable manner and ways disrespects and belittles him, plundering the people by showing contempt while despising him. Yahowah. Marshall, Word Pictures, Proverbs 14:2. This is followed by Barpayu Chotagawa, in the mouth of the foolish simpletons devoid of understanding, the quarrelsome, stubborn, stupid, and shameless there is a haughty and glorified insignificant twig, a sucker, which will arise. Marshall, Word Pictures, Proverbs 14:3. These trolls permeate social media and the internet, infecting hundreds to tens of millions with their videos, tweets, texts, and posts, depending upon the perpetrator. These things known, here is Yahowah's warning. For what reason, lama, why, who, and how many, toward what end and for what purpose, one should ask. Do noisy and confused throngs of scheming and rebellious Gentiles, the preponderance of people of different races and nations, gathered together to conspire in open defiance. Ragash Gawim, do vociferous and disorderly crowds of restless religious, political, and militant ethnicities and countries estranged from Israel rise up vehemently to hastily agitate in fellowship with one another, do such uncultured Theonasses expend considerable energy to thunderously roar and rage, do those still clinging to Babylonian notions a confusing mix of confounding pagan concepts attempt to be noticed and gain attention through their perceived and contrived secretive plots, erupting like an open wound, swirling around and churning things up for the moment, instantaneously clamoring, creating a disturbing tumultuous commotion as part of an unrestrained cult of worshippers for a time by hurriedly conceiving and promoting clandestine conspiracies, all while becoming hardened and crusted over, like chattel, akin to carcasses and corpses which are neither free, living, nor receptive, because while the people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader, these groups who associate and gather together under a unifying individual who changes them in some way as a result of primitive and arcane concepts choose to plot and speak Haggah, are driven away by their choices and utterances, having wrongly decided after selectively searching, then muttering their musings aloud, growling their imagined grievances and interpersonal beliefs, all formed after giving considerable attention to selective information to scheme to remove and expel, driving out the group of people who are the focus of their complaint cal imperfect jussive, continually and literally doing so on their own initiative, moaning and sighing, rumbling like a thunderous lightning storm in vain, deluded in their fantasies, by promoting their unreal claims and worthless myths for absolutely nothing, having drawn their weapons as paid warriors and armed gangs without benefit, without an actual reason or cause, while revealing their unfulfilling and empty lives and dissatisfaction with their situation, these uninhibited scoundrels brandish idle plans, puffery and dreams, and attack to their disadvantage. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 1. This is prophetic of our day when conspiracies, especially those which inappropriately impugn Jews, are so prolific, they are woven into the fabric of the human psyche. When the opposite of what is true becomes widely accepted, we find God asking his creation why they are promoting such stupid conspiratorial notions. What is the end game? What is the purpose? What is to be gained by these ragash gawim, noisy and confused throngs of unrestrained, scheming, and rebellious Gentiles conspiring together in open defiance, such that as a cult they have become wholly unreceptive to the truth? They have become akin to zombies, in that they, like the mindless walking dead, have nothing to live for except to prey on those they have not yet infected. Late in Volume 2 we searched out and found the meaning of Leon, which was deployed perfectly in this context to depict the lives of the conspiratorialists who have been transformed by the antiquated political, religious, and racist propaganda of a conspiratorial leader. It reflects their inclination to group together to reinforce the primitive myths that they are perpetuating. God, himself, refers to conspiracy as rebellion. He acknowledges that conspiracy is comprised of delusional fantasies and our worthless vanity. And yet this counterproductive enterprise will become so popular, it will affect most Gentiles and their nations. For those who claim to be covenant, while at the same time claiming that conspiracies are true, be aware that according to God they would be wrong on both accounts. Conspiracy is just another religion, another poisonous political perspective. There is no reason whatsoever to believe any of them and an overwhelming reason to refrain from promoting them. It is interesting to note that while Haggah is often used to refer to the conspiratorial plots originating in the hearts and minds of wicked men, those who then give expression to their deceitful conspiracies by lying about them, the word is used in both the Isaiah 16, 7 and Jeremiah 59, 1 to express the imagined grievances and interpersonal beliefs associated with the judgment of the modern manifestations of Moab, resulting in the decision to drive them out of the land before exterminating them. Earlier in the Isaiah 8, 19, Haggah is associated with the conspiratorial musings of those in concert with the adversary. But it also has a positive side, with Yahowah using it to encourage his people to ponder the proper response so as to communicate intelligently. Here it is used to say that the proponents of conspiracies are wrong. God is revealing that the conspiratorialists are driven away as a result of their imagined grievances and interpersonal beliefs. He even affirms what anyone seeking to debunk these myths quickly discovers, which is that those prone to believe conspiracies are victims of selective information, meaning that they only consider sources, no matter how dubious, that reinforced their faith. Also telling, Haggah suggests that the actual purpose of their conspiracies is to remove and expel the group of people who are the focus of their complaint. God is thereby impugning the purpose of the mother of all conspiracies, the protocols of the elders of Zion. Rak, the final word in this prophetic announcement, is used in 2 Marshal, Proverbs 12, 11 and 28, 19 to say he who tills his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he who follows the vain is void of understanding and will never be satisfied. Rak is from Ruh, which speaks of being emptied out and unfulfilled, never satisfied, malnourished and impoverished. Rak is also found in Yahowah 29:8 to convey it shall come to be as when a hungry man dreams, and behold, he eats, but when awakened his soul is empty and unsatisfied, so shall the multitude of all of the Gentiles and their nations be when they fight against Mount Zion and the signs posted along the way. Modern research into the growth of conspiracies has found this very thing, calling a lack of personal satisfaction with one's life and a sense of living an empty and unfulfilling, even impoverished existence, the lone common denominator among those who believe and advocate conspiracies. It's wonderful when God reveals something in our distant past, this time 3,000 years before scientists would affirm it. But let's be clear, since Yahowah has been so with us, with the use of Rak we know that conspiracies are comprised of puffery and dreams, and advocating conspiracies is counterproductive. Without exception, every conspiracy man has invented and popularized is bogus. Once upon a time I had thought that there may have been a few that held some merit, only to learn that the alleged perpetrators were overly credited and that there was no one in charge over the years to perpetuate the plan. I also discovered that making the case for the conception and continuance of clandestine schemes was far too convoluted to warrant the effort. These theories require their advocates to be highly selective in the information they consider, while disregarding all evidence to the contrary. And in the end, what does one achieve other than to say that men have a tendency to be conniving and controlling, deceitful and destructive? It's one thing to look into Adam Weishaupt, the order of the Illuminati along with Freemasonry, and his plan to undermine the influence the Roman Catholic Church held on European governments and conclude that his ideas played a role in the French and American revolutions. But to claim that a small clandestine group by whatever name pulls the levers which control the world and have done so continuously for the past 250 years under the auspices of the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, Freemasonry, the Round Table, Skull and Bones, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, Bohemian Grove, and the New World Order, is ridiculous. The fact is, the mythology responsible for almost all of this is Christianity, and Christian fascination with the arrival of the Antichrist. Little do they know that he's already been here and that he is responsible for Luke, Acts, and 14 other New Testament epistles. Let's consider the underlying text for this peculiar fascination: the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Second only to Paul's epistles and the Book of Acts, it is the most notorious, widely distributed, and universally destructive anti-Semitic and conspiratorial text of all time. It was Babel, plagiarized by Christians in Russia in 1903 out of two well-known books, neither of which even mentioned Jews. It was initially serialized in the Russian newspaper, Znamya, the Banner, then published 2 years later as an appendix to The Great and the Small: The Coming of the Antichrist and the Rule of Satan on Earth by the Christian author Sergei Nilus. Its purpose was to spread Christian mass hatred of Jews by claiming that it provided actual documentation of the minutes taken to memorialize 24 meetings between Jewish rabbis, recording their secret plans as a race to rule the world by manipulating the economy, controlling the media, subverting the morals of Gentiles, and fostering religious conflict. This commingling and twisting of books detailing European political and religious intrigue was originally thought to be nothing more than a parody conceived by changing the words to a popular song, such that the new lyrics degraded Jews during the time of the vicious anti-Jewish pogroms in the Russian Empire, from which countless Jews died and were exiled. In fact, many of the same anti-Semites responsible for the mass abuse of Jews during the pogroms played a role in the hoax of the protocols to justify their actions. For this reason, Pavel Krushevan, the book's initial publisher, deliberately obscured the origins of the text Sergei Nilus had composed to make the lies appear credible. But nonetheless, he left a wide trail of contradictions, each sufficient to properly assess credit and blame. Just prior to this time, following the partitions of Poland, the Russian Empire inherited the world's largest Jewish population. In the shtetls in which they lived, these Jewish refugees stayed to themselves, governed themselves, and took care of themselves. And while they willingly paid their taxes, acknowledged the authority of the Tsar, and served in the Imperial Russian army, they had the misfortune of arriving in Russia when the ruling class became more hardline in its reactionary policies, promoting the ideas of Christian orthodoxy, Tsarist autocracy, and Russian nationality. The Jews who attempted to assimilate were regarded with suspicion as infiltrators trying to take over the society, while Jews who remained true to their culture were resented as undesirable aliens. And it was out of this xenophobic anti-immigrant, political and religious milieu that the protocols were written by those who falsely projected their flawed character on those they despised. Those who actually engaged in racial genocide justified their bloodlust by blaming those they were killing of secretly wanting to be just like them. It is stunning in a way. The Jews who were blamed for trying to control the world had no country to call home. They had just been pushed out of Poland only to enter Russia, where they were terrorized. In a matter of decades, they would be gassed and incinerated by the millions in concentration camps throughout Poland and Germany. The impoverished were mistreated by those who sought to rule the world politically and religiously, such that their race, Russian or German, Arab or Japanese, Italian or Spanish, would reign supreme. And therein lies the revolting heart of all conspiratorialists. Those who promote them are guilty of the crimes they falsely project on others. That is not to say that Jews were entirely innocent. One Jew in particular went out of his way to harm his people, serving as a modern-day Paul. The idea of an international Jewish conspiracy for world domination was actually minted 60 years earlier by Jacob Brufman, a Russian Jew from Minsk. He claimed to have had a falling out with agents of a local Kahal, the autonomous government of Ashkenazi Jews, even though it had been abolished 20 years earlier. After converting to the Russian Orthodox Church, he authored polemics against the Talmud and the extinct Kahals, falsely claiming that they not only continued to exist but that they met in secret to undermine Christian entrepreneurs such that they could confiscate their property and seize their power. He would write, "The local and universal Jewish brotherhoods in the Book of the Kahal." While mostly a projection of his new Russian orthodoxy, Brufman's fanciful conspiracy of international Jewish shadow governments was used to justify the pogroms. During this same period, a British subject of Dutch Jewish ethnicity, wrote Conquest of the World by the Jews. This troubled soul served in the Ottoman army and converted to Islam. As with both of these men, as was the case with the Russians and Prussians behind the protocols, it was all about scapegoating, about blaming someone other than oneself for our problems. The Russians blamed Jews for losing the Russo-Japanese War and the 1905 revolution, just as Germans blamed Jews for losing the First World War. And then after the Tsarists lost the 1917 Russian Revolution, Jews were once again blamed, with the protocols becoming a political weapon wielded by conservatives the world over against liberals. The Bolshevik communists were falsely depicted as overwhelmingly Jewish, executing the plan presented in the protocols. Paradoxically, the early Russian edition of the protocols specifically acknowledged that they did not come from a Zionist organization, the absolute opposite of what was later claimed of it. Later editions would claim that the document, which was never produced, was stolen from a secret Jewish organization, and yet, a living contradiction, it was written in the first-person plural, as if the plotters were telling their own story in their own words. But even then, the protocols are awash in generalizations and platitudes and completely devoid of specifics, of anything a rational person could use to fact-check the story. Following the Russian Revolution of 1917, this purported Jewish conspiracy to dominate the world was brought to the West by anti-Bolshevik, anti-communist Christians and circulated across Europe, the United States, South America, Japan, and of course, the Islamic Middle East. It was immediately popularized in America by the automaker, Henry Ford, who in 1920 published a series of articles based on the protocols in his Detroit newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, and then paid for, printed, and distributed 500,000 copies under the title The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. Not surprisingly, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, who claimed that the protocols were factual, were lavish in their praise of Ford. But the paradigm of capitalism did not work alone. He had help slandering Jews in the form of Father Coughlin, the Roman Catholic priest who was the first to use radio to reach a mass audience. He routinely entertained his 30 million listeners with his pro-fascist and anti-Semitic rhetoric, calling for the nationalization of all major industries and the end of democracy and capitalism, calling for the abolition of political parties and elections. He went from being one of FDR's most outspoken advocates, telling a congressional hearing, "God is directing President Roosevelt," to being one of his biggest critics over monetary policy, advocating the nationalization of the Federal Reserve. The Roman Catholics' political advocacy organization, Social Justice, published weekly installments of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. A year after the Henry Ford publications in America, in 1921, the London Times presented conclusive proof that the Protocols was nothing more than clumsy plagiarism. Alan Dulles, who was in Constantinople developing relationships with the post-Ottoman Turks, actually reported the source from which it was plagiarized to the Times, and would later, without success, lobby the U.S. State Department to publicly denounce the forgery. They confirmed that it had been copied indirectly from a French political satire that never even mentioned Jews, Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, written by Maurice Joly, a French attorney, in 1868. That in itself is interesting because Machiavelli wrote that prince to increase the political and religious authority of the Roman Catholic Church and to concentrate absolute power under a single individual, the Pope. He encouraged popes to be ruthless tyrants, totally merciless, because the fear of terrorist tactics would cause people to submit to their authority and, according to Machiavelli, the end result justified the means used to achieve it. The sole intent of the prince was to establish Roman Catholic domination over the earth, not Jewish influence. Further, Montesquieu's position was just the opposite. He was a French philosopher who popularized the idea of separating governmental authority so that it was not concentrated under a single individual. The United States Constitution was influenced by his philosophy, as it gave rise to the shared powers of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. Therefore, the fictional religious and political satire from which the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was plagiarized, was actually written in protest of the regime of Louis Napoleon Bonaparte who ruled France from 1848 through 1870. The ghost of Montesquieu made the case for freedom while the ghost of Machiavelli opined for despotism. The spirit of Machiavelli would claim he wouldn't even need 20 years to transform utterly the most indomitable European character and render it as a docile under tyranny as the debased people of Asia addressing the Islamic kingdoms of the Middle East. But Montesquieu insisted that the people's desire for freedom was invincible. Over the course of 25 dialogues, step by step, Machiavelli, who in Joly plot covertly represented Napoleon, explains how he would replace freedom with despotism in any given European country. He states absolute power will no longer be an accident of fortune but will become a need of the modern society. Recognizing that Machiavelli would prevail on behalf of a unified and draconian church and state, with the Roman Catholic Church dominating the world, the secular Montesquieu laments in the end, "Eternal God, what have you permitted?" Joly, for having exposed the menace of church and state, was arrested and jailed for 18 months in the Saint-Pélagie prison in Paris and his book was banned. The Protocols 1-19 closely follow the order of Maurice Joly Dialogues 1-17, with identifiable phrases from Joly peppering the anti-Semitic fuss. And as an interesting aside, Joly, a monarchist and legitimist proponent of royalty and dynastic succession, actually plagiarized much of his dialogue in hell from a novel by Eugene Sue, Les Mystères du Peuple. The initial transformation into an anti-Semitic text was accomplished in the Prussian novel by Hermann Goethe, called Biarritz to Sedan, which was published in 1868. Goethe, an anti-Semitic postal worker, was an agent provocateur for the Prussian secret police. In 1849 he had been convicted of forging letters which were used as evidence to frame democratic leaders. Losing his job at the post office, Goethe began working as a conservative columnist for the Neuen Preußischen Zeitung newspaper along with notables such as Otto von Bismarck, soon thereafter traveling to Turkey before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. His leisure time was consumed writing romance novels with a political bent under the pen name Sir John Ratcliffe, typically attacking either Jews or the British government. Then in 1868, Goethe plagiarized and bastardized dialogue in hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, by replacing Machiavelli's Roman Catholic conspiratorial despot debating a secular libertarian with the fictional Elders of Zion. Beyond substituting names, he added the chapter, at the Jewish cemetery in Prague, where in a secret rabbinical cabal, the Council of Representatives of the 12 tribes of Israel, unaware of the fact that all but 2 of the 12 tribes remained lost after the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom, conducted one of their centennial meetings at midnight in the cemetery in which the devil is said to have played a starring role. This work of complete fiction alleges to report on the progress of the long-term rabbinical conspiracy to establish world domination. In addition to the Machiavellian schemes, Goethe added acquisition of property, transforming craftsmen into industrial workers, infiltration into high public offices, and control of the press, such that, according to Chairman Levitt, fellow rabbis would become kings of the world in 100 years. The fictional rabbinical speech was frequently quoted as if it were an authentic episode and cited as proof of the authenticity of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But even here, like Satan himself, Goethe borrowed heavily from a scene in the French portrayal of the life of Count Alessandro Cagliostro, whose alias, Giuseppe Balsamo, became the title of the book by Alexandre Dumas. This rather infamous Italian, who died in 1795, was an occultist, psychic, alchemist, healer, and magician. Count Alessandro Cagliostro, aka Giuseppe Balsamo, became one of several central players in the days leading to the French Revolution as a result of his role in the plot of the affair of the diamond necklace, which is why the book about his life was written, and from which the most famous chapter of the Protocols was pilfered. Goethe's at the Jewish cemetery in Prague appeared in St. Petersburg in pamphlet format as purported non-fiction and celebrated as truly being frighteningly accurate. That conspiracy was so intriguing and well known, it is a wonder anyone believed the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Count Alessandro Cagliostro was one of 4 con artists tried by the Paris Parliament over the necklace. And while it's likely that the man who claimed to have been abandoned after being born to Christians of nobility, and who travelled to Medina, Mecca, and Cairo prior to being admitted into the Roman Catholic Sovereign Military Order of Malta, played only a minor role in the affair, the story chronicled in the book Christians plagiarized to create the concluding chapter of the Protocols demonstrates the lure of conspiracy. The diamond necklace about which this whole affair began, was offered to Queen Marie Antoinette, the wife of King Louis XVI of France. She turned it down, saying we have more need of 70 ships than of necklaces. But the truth did not stand in the way of the fictional tale promoted by the Jacobins to discredit the Queen. While it was not true, pamphlets flooded France, attesting to the notion that Antoinette had attempted to defraud the crown jewelers, all of which was used to justify her beheading and the French Revolution. In reality, because the crown jewelers couldn't get the Queen to buy their necklace, they elicited the help of trickster Jean de Saint-Remy Valois, who conceived the plan to use the necklace to gain royal patronage, and thus wealth and power in Roman Catholic France. After becoming the mistress of Cardinal de Rohan, whom Marie Antoinette despised for being a rumourmonger who spread lies about her to the Holy Roman Empress Maria Theresa, Jean de Saint-Remy played the cardinal, who became convinced as a result of letters that she forged, that Marie Antoinette was secretly in love with him. Then, to fool the cardinal into believing that she and the Queen were close, Saint-Remy Valois, in August of 1784 arranged for Cardinal de Rohan to meet the Queen in the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. But unbeknownst to Rohan, rather than being greeted by Antoinette, Saint-Remy arranged for the cardinal to meet with a prostitute, Nicole d'Oliva, who was chosen for the role because of her resemblance to Antoinette. After Jean de Saint-Remy entered the French royal court through another lover, Riteau de Villette, she continued to manipulate Cardinal Rohan. He transferred large sums of money to her under the guise of supporting the Queen's charity work while she perpetuated the myth of her close ties with Antoinette. She became so brazen with her forgeries, many, including the jewelers Bermet and Bassange, embraced her deceptions as real, resolving to use her to sell their necklace, offering her a commission. A talented con artist and forger, the French trickster, Jean de Saint-Remy Valois, pretending to be Queen Marie Antoinette, sent several letters to Cardinal de Rohan which included an order to buy the necklace, even signing each letter Marie Antoinette de France. But since there was starvation and poverty in France, Saint-Remy asked the cardinal to act as a secret intermediary. So he negotiated a price to be paid in installments, claiming to have the Queen's authorization, showing the jewelers the documents Jean de Saint-Remy Valois had forged for the occasion. After bringing the necklace home, Saint-Remy arranged for a valet to fetch it and promptly picked the necklace apart and sold the gems on the black markets of Paris and London. Then, when Bermet complained to the Queen about not receiving any future installments, Antoinette correctly stated that she had not ordered nor received the necklace. Immediately thereafter, on the Assumption of Mary, August 15, 1785, as Cardinal de Rohan prepared to officiate in the royal chapel, he was summoned before the King and Queen to explain himself. Evidently prepared, he presented the forged letter signed Marie Antoinette de France, not knowing that French royalty signed only with their given names. King Louis, recognizing that Cardinal de Rohan, having spent his life in and around the palace, should have known this, arrested the cardinal and sent him to the Bastille. On the way, he sent a note to Jean de Saint-Remy Valois, telling her to destroy all copies of the fraudulent operation. At the same time, the police also arrested the prostitute, Nicole d'Oliva, who confessed, while indicting the noted Freemason and occultist, Alessandro Cagliostro, the man whose biography became the basis of the most notorious chapter of the Protocols. Politically connected, Cardinal de Rohan and Alessandro Cagliostro chose to be judged by the Parlement de Paris, rather than the king. And while they were acquitted for political and religious reasons, the affair of the diamond necklace was now news the world over and the stuff of conspiracy. Meanwhile, Jean de Saint-Remy Valois was condemned to whipping and branded with a V for voleurs, thief on each shoulder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment in the prostitutes' prison at the Salpêtrière, from which she escaped dressed as a boy. But that is not the end of the story. As conspiracies are wont to do, even with the French government and Marie Antoinette both being innocent, and the Roman Catholic cardinal complicit, the people preferred the scandalous and seductive deceptions, and blamed the Queen, believing that she was a manipulative spendthrift, more interested in vanity than the welfare of the people. As for Jean de Saint-Remy Valois, she took refuge in London and in 1789 published her Memoirs Justificatifs, once again libeling Queen Marie Antoinette. The conspiracy of the diamond necklace affair opened the floodgates of malicious attacks on the crown, especially the Queen, all deliberately orchestrated to bring down the monarchy. Salacious and degrading pamphlets, yesteryear's social media, kindled the fires that led to the French Revolution, with wholly fabricated, albeit lurid, tales contrived to fashion the perfect scapegoat for the Jacobins to deploy. It was akin to the most famous line attributed to the French monarchy, Quils mangent de la brioche, let them eat cake, which in ancient literature was supposedly spoken by a great princess upon learning that the peasants had no bread. And while the phrase is commonly attributed to Queen Marie Antoinette to discredit her, there is no record of her having said it. It was yet another lie at the heart of a conspiracy, not a word of which was true. A work of Babel, a complete fabrication lifted from books having everything to do with European politics and Roman Catholicism, and nothing whatsoever to do with Jews, was presented in newspapers as if they were reporting the news. The worst part of the protocols is that it allowed anti-Semites to spread their hatred of Jews worldwide. And it became a blueprint for one absurd conspiracy after another. Even when it wasn't true, Jews are now seen as controlling every significant human endeavor. Today, the most commonly read rendition of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was anonymously augmented in 1934 to include articles from Ford's Dearborn Independent, thereby expanding the original and Nihilus 1905 book The Great in the Small, The Coming of the Antichrist and the Rule of Satan on Earth. The 1934 text, still purporting to be a transcription of minutes stolen from the 18th century rabbinical cabal, includes a 1920 citation from Chaim Weitzman whereby he simply states that Jews are dispersed all over the world. Rather than prove that the alleged document alleging to have been written 2 centuries earlier was a complete hoax, the conspirators used the innocuous Weitzman citation as evidence that a national home in Palestine is only camouflage and an infinitesimal part of the Jews' real object. The Jews of the world have no intention of settling in Palestine or any separate country, and that Jews are now a world menace for which the Aryan races will have to domicile them permanently out of Europe. And the fact remains that conspiracies are credibility quicksand. And that is yet another reason that Yahowah doesn't want his people venturing into them. He doesn't want his message contaminated by them. After all, God has already endured the millennia, having his veracity impugned by all the religions which claim to speak for him. The last thing he wants is to endure yet another blow from the dumbest among us. Yahowah recognizes that anyone who dares step into the murky realm of clandestine schemes gets filthy, and is stained by the experience, even if they manage to escape. And no one gets out unscathed. It's a muddy and murky world with few facts and tenuous speculations. It is not a place for those who wish to be known based upon evidence and reason. Here then is a recap of this extraordinarily important prophetic statement. For what reason, how many, and toward what end, one should ask, do noisy and confused throngs of scheming and rebellious Gentiles, the overwhelming majority of people of different races and nations, gather together to conspire in open defiance, attempting to be noticed and gain attention through their perceived and contrived secretive plots, erupting like an open wound, swirling around and churning things up for the moment, as part of an unrestrained cult of worshippers hurriedly conceiving and promoting clandestine conspiracies, all while becoming hardened and crusted over, because the people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader choose to plot and speak such that they are driven away by their choices and utterances, having wrongly decided after selectively searching, then muttering their musings aloud, growling their imagined grievances and intrapersonal beliefs, all formed after giving considerable attention to selective information to scheme to remove and expel the group of people who are the focus of their complaint in vain, deluded in their fantasies which reflect their unfulfilling and empty lives, their dissatisfaction with their situation, and all to their disadvantage. Mizmor 2:1. With the exception of Daud and his son in Israel, no government has been authorized or established by God. Paul lied in his repulsive letter to the Romans and again in Hebrews, as did the Roman Catholic Church, which grew out of his perverse doctrine. God is as opposed to government as he is to religion, as opposed to militaries as he is to conspiracy. He disdains these human contrivances because they are counterproductive and self-serving, having been created and perpetuated by the worst among us. The rulers Melech, the governmental leaders of the earth Ares, the material realm and land solely on their own initiative, continually set themselves up Yazab, prominently present themselves without justification or authorization, take a stand and defend themselves, serving only themselves, thereby committing themselves hit pale imperfect, consistently on their own initiative, without any outside influence, authorization, justification, or authority. Those who govern Rosen, political leaders and their governments, those claiming primacy of authority conspire and rebel, have from the beginning schemed to rise up needful perfect. Those who govern will not only conspire at some point in time, they will suffer the effects of their rebellion altogether yakad, in a united fashion against al, because of, in front of, and over and above Yahowah, and wa against al, because of, in front of, and over and above his Mashiach, anointed Mashiach, to set apart for his service, using an application of olive oil as a symbol of his set-apart spirit to demonstrate his authorization and authority. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 2. There are those who claim that God has chosen the leaders of nations and that he is guiding them. They would all be wrong. They have always been wrong. While there is considerable justification to seeing conspirators in every religious and political scheme, of seeing men manipulating the system for their own personal advantage, they have been so open about it and insistent upon it, that the amalgamation of religion and politics is hardly a conspiracy. Throughout the long march of civilization there has been a solitary unifying theme. Cleric and king have supported each other's claim to divine sanction. They have typically been inseparable, with the emperor serving as head of the church and with the church crowning the king. In imperial Rome, the Caesars were worshipped as gods, as was the case in Egypt with her pharaohs and Babylon with her kings. Beginning with Emperor Theodosius in 400 CE, at the point that imperial Rome became indistinguishable from the Roman Catholic Church, each successive despot throughout Europe would claim that they had God's authorization to rule. What's not surprising about this is that religious and political schemes have always been two sides of the same coin. They are human contrivances designed to achieve the same result: to concentrate authority, power, control, property, and wealth among the few. And they were all conceived to be compatible, to work in harmony with one another to create a system that would be difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to break free. Trapped within it, the masses are like cartoon characters in flatland, incapable of envisioning what lies beyond their imposed reality. It is why Yahowah could not find a single individual through whom to convey his message for thousands of years. There was no one sufficiently capable and courageous, rational and literate, willing to break free of these integrated control mechanisms and risk everything to expose and condemn those who not only claimed to have God's authorization to govern every aspect of their lives, but who held all of the weapons and armies to wield them, and controlled the police, judges, and prisons. In such a world, there were no Noachs, no Abrahams, no Jacobs, no Moses, no Yashas, no Shamuels, no Dauds, no Hushas, no Yashayas, or Yermiahs. No one, not a single capable individual willing to question and then remove the bonds of religion and politics who was receptive to following Yahowah and going where his words led, which would be in abject conflict with what everyone else believed. So perhaps now, from this perspective, we can better appreciate why Yahowah pleaded with his people not to follow in the ways of the Gentiles and their nations, to refrain from being political and religious. But it would not be easy. The web of lies is so intertwined, and we have all been influenced and indoctrinated, even manipulated, like Lot, so ensnared by these deceptive and deadly human contrivances that even when one among us would find reason to cut a spinneret, there would be hundreds more, all sticky and interwoven, all designed to immobilize prey seeking to walk away. Keep in mind, these webs were spun to be unseen, even unfelt with their silky smooth bonds. And yet the tensile strength of these spiders' webs, like those found in nature serving as a metaphor, would be greater than the same weight of steel and even more elastic. Those who would struggle against them would wear themselves out, and they would become ever more ensnared in these convoluted traps. Those who witnessed others' rebellious fight for their freedom, pursuing a way out, only to die a public and excruciating death, would be dissuaded from doing likewise, deterred from rebelling and seeking to flee the control apparatus. What's surprising here is that the Christian Church, especially Roman Catholic and Orthodox, played such a damning role in all of this, when all anyone had to do to expose their malfeasance would be to point out what Daud wrote in the second Mizmor, Psalm. But it would never be that simple. Those who wrongly claim God's authority are never persuaded otherwise, even by God's own words. And the masses confined and twisted up in their binding web of lies, are seldom if ever receptive to a reality other than the one they have been conditioned to believe. The Christian Church lacks neither scholars nor Bibles, only the will to learn from God's word. Quite honestly, the webs of politics and religion, like those of social customs and conspiracies, are filled with holes. Each spindly thread is easily broken. But there are so many of them within these interwoven control contrivances, because they have been designed to integrate almost every aspect of the human experience, that without an unbridled passion to be free, a fully functioning neshama, conscience, and divine direction, most people not only remain trapped, they don't even know that they are constrained. Moreover, those who break the bonds of religion are typically ensnared by a political scheme that is no better. Thinking that they are going from faith to reason, they simply find themselves trapped in a different web of lies. It is the story of Abraham seeking Yahowah's help with his nephew, Lot, of what the entangled and ensnared got right and wrong. It's about 4 individuals who, with the guidance of Yahowah's messengers, finally broke free of Sodom, representing modern Moab, before it was destroyed, who would later reject the guidance offered to them by the messengers which would have taken them home. Moab is all around us. We have become like Sodom. Even on a planet with 7 billion souls, fewer than 7,000 will break free of this web. It took the perfect storm for me to break out of the interwoven web of politics, religion, economics, societal customs, patriotism, conspiracy, and militarism. I not only lost my business, a public company, due to the deceitful machinations of the most religious employees, I was publicly crucified in the media, severing my faith in the religious, economic, and journalistic institutions upon which the nation was built. Shortly thereafter I became disenfranchised from politics, patriotism, and the military, especially after getting to know George Bush and then witnessing the revolting carnage of 9/11. I saw the president act as he told me he would, counterproductively invading 2 uninvolved nations, fundamentally changing the world for the worse and bankrupting my country, all on a web of lies. Then adding to the perfect storm, I had to walk away from a psychotic father and abusive wife, eroding the myths of family values. Free of every sticky and silky spinneret, I was like Abram after he had walked out of Babylon. Unlike Abram, however, while there was a Torah to read, it was so poorly translated that it wasn't nearly enough to embrace the truth. Worse, it was hidden beneath a mountain of New Testament lies. I was still living in the world Shaul had woven, not the one in which Daud had so brilliantly expanded. But as I pursued the connections between 9/11 and Islam at Yahowah's direction, I discovered an insight that profoundly changed my life. Pondering why Allah, who is Satan, would denounce Satan in his Quran, I came to understand what Yahowah had revealed about the adversary and his connections with Babylon in Yahshua 14. Satan despises his depiction as the adversary because it precludes him from his prime objective, which is to be worshipped as the god of religion. The final bond to be pulled away was Shaul, another man who admitted to being demon-possessed. Having witnessed the binding strands of religion and politics, of economics and militarism dissolve, and having come to understand the source and purpose of the matrix, I was free to do as Enoch and Abram, as Uoshe and Daud, had done, which was to actually listen to what Yahowah had to say and then act upon his guidance. Over the ensuing 18 years, we have come a long way by never venturing off course, and by always trusting Yahowah's testimony. As a result, the path out of Moab, out of Edom, and away from Ammon to the Promised Land has been more clearly marked and illuminated. The neck banner has been comprised and Yahowah is lifting it up to call his people home out of the 3 Babylons. One of the interesting things about being Mashiach anointed is that the recipient is separated and set apart from all others, and thus cannot be seen as integrated into a popular religion or movement. At the time this was written there was only one man who had been Mashiach anointed by Yahowah, the author of this psalm, David. Yahusha was never Mashiach by God and is thus not the Messiah as Christians believe. To be Mashiach in the most positive and authorized sense as Yahowah defined the concept, one has to be anointed in olive oil at Yahowah's direction. While Daud represents the truest sense of the word, as is the case with most Hebrew terms, Mashiach isn't necessarily a good thing. Yahowah used it in conjunction with Cyrus, the Babylonian king, who lived and died as a pagan estranged from God. He was Mashiach, but only as a tool to be wielded to gain the attention of a wayward nation. The only reference to Yahusha as being Mashiach wasn't in the sense of bequeathing the title, the Messiah, but instead was used in Daniel as an adjective modifying messenger. As such, there is no legitimate basis for Christ or Christian, the transliterated Greek corruptions of the concept. The good news here for Israel is that God's people are being led to see this as it once was and remains, as the choice between Yahowah and Daud on one side and the adversary and Shaul on the other. The Mashiach anointed they are being asked to accept is the king of the millennial kingdom, the beloved son and psalmist, Daud, not the Christian Messiah crafted into the image of Dionysus. Christians have consistently transformed their Messiah into a beast that God, himself, wouldn't recognize. Their Jesus Christ has so little in common with his actual name, title, prophetic portrayal, and purpose that no Torah-observant Jew could possibly identify him based upon their religious depictions. As a result, it's little wonder they continue to reject Yahusha. But there is another problem, also of a religious nature, causing Israel to reject Yahusha. According to the acclaimed prophecy in the 9th chapter of Yahshua, the Son of God, and thus by implication, Mashiach, was to be a Gibor, a mighty leader and gallant warrior who would conquer Israel's Goyim enemies, unify the kingdom, and bring peace to the land. These attributes have always been at the heart of why Akiba was able to fool so many in the Yahowah of 133 into following the warlord, Shimon Bar Kokhba, to their doom against Rome. But what they have all missed is that Daud was and will be that Mashiach, anointed Messiah. He is the Word of God and the one who leads us to God. He is the living embodiment of the Torah's purpose and the covenant's nature. Speaking of his mistaken identity, it was not until quite recently that the rulers of the earth united in their rebellion against Yahowah and his Mashiach. Prior to 1948, kings fought against kings, and those who govern against other governments. But after the devastating consequence of the Third Reich and their Roman Catholic allies of Imperial Japan and Soviet Socialist Russia, even Communist China, the world was bereft of 200 million lives, and so the nations began deliberating in the United Nations. And in their first year, they not only passed a resolution reconstituting Israel, they wrote it such that the nation would never survive. Since the psalmist has been blunt, let's be clear: the United Nations is not conspiring against Jesus Christ. Christianity is the dominant religion in the majority of the nations represented in the UN, but they are almost uniformly opposed to Israel, the kingdom Daud was uniquely Mashiach anointed to lead. Moreover, just as it was in Daud's day, Shaul remains his principal adversary. So the world is united against the God, Torah, chosen people, and promised land of Daud, David, Yahowah's Mashiach Messiah, most especially in opposition to his home on Zion. Now, just as we have been told that the millennial kingdom during the long Shabbat celebration of Sukkah following God's return will be the kingdom of Daud, we are discovering that the world will be united against the man Yahowah chose to guide and lead his people, the man who explained how to properly observe his Torah. It is, after all, Daud's words on the neck banner Yahowah is raising that will call his people home. Daud knows that man seeks to control while God seeks to free. He understands that we must break free of human religious and political, military and conspiratorial dominion before we can participate in the covenant. So at this time, Daud, Yahowah's Mashiach, is asking his people to break free of all forms of government control. Will you join us? Let us choose of our own volition to break and pull off Nathak, to snap off and tear away, being set free and purged, separated from by bursting free of Peel imperfect cohortative their bonds which trap and ensnare ethmokahem, that which binds and immobilizes, their spinnerets and tethers, their fetters, shackles, and chains, and thus religious and political restraints, man's yokes which control and tame and war desire to cast off and throw away shalak, reject, cast away and fling hyphil cohortative imperfect from us min and arnu their twisted and interwoven threads which bind and immobilize both hem, their fibrous ropes and cordage, their intertwined web of silky and sticky spinnerets which fasten and tie, that which they can twist and pervert to harness and control. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 3. To my knowledge this has never been done in all of human history. So it too is prophetic, and speaking of another time, our time. This is, therefore, Daud calling out from history to the present day, hoping that Yisrael will listen to him and remove the twisted, interwoven, and entangled threads which bind them to human institutions. It is only once this is done that any of us, including Yisrael, can return to Yahowah. As an interesting insight, just as there are religious, political, and militaristic, economic, societal, and conspiratorial schemes, most spiders have 6 spinnerets which they can manipulate independently or in concert with one another. These spinnerets are not simple structures with a single orifice producing a single thread, but instead highly complex structures of microscopic spigots capable of twisting together and combining these nearly invisible filaments. Without doing so, the independent silk threads would be weak and useless. In life, God has given us a metaphor through which to understand the interwoven web of human Babel. Beyond this, spiders extrude silk from their spinnerets to do more than build webs designed to ensnare other unsuspecting insects, imprisoning those they trap. They construct silken galleries for their own protection, use their spinnerets to distribute their sperm and to expand their brood. They even weave cocoons for their metamorphosis. If you are reading this, and have not done so, if you are still political or religious, pull off everything that binds you to man's control mechanisms and throw it all away, especially that which is a both, combined and twisted in Babylonian fashion, to bind and control. It is a simple truth, and yet one which is at conflict with everything we have been indoctrinated to believe. To be free we must be apolitical, neither voting nor submitting. To be saved, we must be anti-religious, neither believing nor participating. To be right with God, we must acknowledge all that is wrong with man. There is no path to the covenant, no way into heaven, no means to salvation that is accessible through any religious or political scheme. It isn't until we free ourselves from their bonds that we are free to know and approach Yahowah, recognizing that those Yahowah is laughing at are those who have conspired to oppose him and ensnare his people. We read, He who inhabits, establishing his dwelling place Yashab, He who sits and restores, lives and renews in the heavens Bahar Shamim, in the spiritual realms holds them in contempt and will pulverize them. Sashak mocks and scoffs at them, lacking any concern over rubbing his enemies away because he disrespects and disdains them, seeing them as a source of derision over whom he is amused and laughs. Kalim perfect. Yahowah ridicules their foreign behavior and mocks their unfamiliar language. Laglahem scoffs and disparages their unintelligible stammering. Kalim perfect. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 4. For most of human history, God has ignored the political and religious mumblings of man. The lone exceptions have been when it either occurred in the promised land or the suffering of his people became too great for them to bear. What we have not seen is Yahowah scoffing with disdain over the ridiculousness of man's behavior and unintelligible stammering. So, yet again, this is prophetic of the days leading to his return when evil reaches a menacing crescendo. I rather enjoy laughing along with Yah, even of us being entertaining to one another, but none of us should ever want Yahowah to laugh at us, to disrespect, mock, or ridicule us, as the world has done to him through their religious portrayals. So now, after enduring many millennia of this, he is seen responding to the world's religious leaders, especially those who are misleading and oppressing his people. It is, however, more appropriate than we might imagine. It was early one morning at the base of Mount Korab while Moshe was transcribing the Torah with Yahowah that the recently liberated children of Israel were led astray by a Haran. At his direction they fashioned the molten metal bull out the jewelry received from the Egyptians and started Sashak, laughing and playing before it, in essence contemptuously mocking Yahowah and disrespecting him. Shemoth, Exodus 32, 6. What they did, and what political and religious leaders are saying and doing today, is contemptible, even laughable. Nonetheless, the very idea of God being amused that the leaders of men actually believe that they have the authority or ability to oppose him, and of him playing around with them, mocking them and laughing at them, is frankly uncomfortable. But if we were to put ourselves in his shoes, it is how we would react if we watched an imbecilic imam blow himself and his class of would-be terrorists to smithereens in a case of premature detonation. Further, Yahowah should hold those who claim to speak for him in contempt for deceiving and subjugating his people. And he has every right to pulverize them for centuries of oppressive religious and political behavior. It should not be surprising that he ridicules their strange behavior and mocks their unintelligible statements. Like Paul, and Muhammad after him, their every word would be unfamiliar. It will be no laughing matter. Then as, at this time and place he will communicate, expressing himself to Bah, he will make statements, speaking peel imperfect towards the Melhem, in their direction and against them, showing his frustration and resentment. Bafhu, in his overt animosity and resolute anger, and in his burning indignation. Bacharunhu, demonstrating his intense hatred and resounding anger, will overwhelm and bewilder them. Bahalhem, causing them to tremble by terrifying them. Peel imperfect. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 5. This is again prophetic of what we should expect in year 6000 Yah, in the fall of 2033 on our Roman pagan calendars. Here we find God holding those in leadership positions within society accountable. Before sending the religious and political authorities who misled his creation while claiming to represent him off to their eternal incarceration, he is going to excoriate them. So much for the judge not lest you be judged theory. We are reminded that those who extol the fear of God will come to tremble before him. Those who commend love without hate will come to experience the nature of righteous indignation. And for those who have worshipped a religious God, they will find the real one bewildering. The first sentence of the first chapter of the first volume of Observations for Our Time reads, "Hate is a virtue." This idea is in such discord with modern Mawap it was likely shocking for most readers, even though the argument on its behalf was rational and moral. And yet throughout our study of Yahowah's testimony we have been constantly reminded that God not only hates, he is continually teaching us to express a righteous indignation towards those who harm his children and mislead his people. This is but one more example. What follows could be in Yahowah's voice, but I think it reads far more naturally to make the transition from doubt to God where Dowd announces it, which is toward the conclusion of 2:7. So while all of 2:6 could reflect God speaking through Dowd to us, since the next sentence is unquestionably in Dowd's voice, and the citation is clearly from Yahowah, this is likely Dowd's intent. I, myself, have offered leadership wa any nakak, and I have exercised my authority by being a capable leader and pouring forth guidance cal perfect, providing counsel through my governance melekeni, providing my advice to consider and respond to as the authorized ruler and designated authority, through my kingship to ponder upon alongside Zion, the signs posted along the way Zion, the instruction on the signposts identifying the proper direction and marking the place where the aspirations of the covenant are known, my set-apart mountain Har Kodesheni. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2:6. The integration of Daud into the lyrics of his own psalm at this point is telling, because he is telling those living today that he has provided some guidance in this regard that would be wise to consider. Daud was Mashiach, anointed by Yahowah, and thus the leader with God's unquestioned and designated authority to provide counsel for humankind to ponder. And there is no question that Daud took his role seriously, pouring out God's guidance through every word he wrote. To a large degree, it is Daud's lyrics which were inscribed on the signs posted upon Mount Zion. He revealed the way to God in every psalm he wrote, most especially the 19th and 119th on the Torah and the 22nd and 88th as an eyewitness to its fulfillment in this same place. Zion is as much Daud's as it is Yahowah's, both had homes built there. There may be some who think it is unseemly for Daud to express himself in this way, as there is no hint of humility in these words. But he is exactly as he ought to be, pridefully and accurately taking credit for his role in bringing man to the covenant through the Torah and for the unique place he earned with God. Our work on Yahowah's behalf, our willingness to do as Daud has done, to expose and condemn man's ways while sharing Yah's words and way, should be a source of great satisfaction and accomplishment. And yet none of us, not even Abraham or Moshe, are as loved by Yahowah as was, is, and forever will be, God's beloved son, not even Yahusha. I've long come to appreciate Yah's love affair with this man, recognizing the fact that Daud not only wrote the lyrics to observe and celebrate the Torah, his life exemplifies the Torah's purpose to right the wrong and perfect the imperfect. But even I had not considered the full scope of what Yahowah has chosen to give Daud, the earth, and perhaps even the entire material realm. It will all be part of his kingdom. That is not to shortchange the rest of us. As Yah's most beloved leader, reflecting his father's nature, Daud will freely share with the rest of the family what has been given to him. Moreover, while the earth is large, and the universe larger, they are infinitely smaller than our future home in the seventh dimension. I rather like the way Daud wrote this introduction. He realizes that in spite of all of his flaws, the characteristics which endeared him to Yahowah, his intellect, passion, courage, confidence, character, and ability to reason and understand, then brilliantly write the insights he has derived from the Torah has earned him a special place, one which is so spectacular. Daud wants us to know that it was all Yahowah's doing. I will choose to account for, proclaiming and writing kappa, I will, of my own free will, record and recount, putting the decree into effect by informing through written communication and documentation Peel imperfect cohortative the decree and prescription for living, the clearly written announcement on that which cuts us into the relationship of the Almighty El, of God which Yahowah Edema, declared cal perfect to me Eleni, of me and regarding me, you are my son be Eniata. This day Hayom, at this time and in the light of day I any bring you forth as your father Yeladata, am responsible for you as a father gives birth to and raises a child such that they grow, bearing and assisting you. 2:7. Feel free to ask questions about this, seeking to learn the answers because literally out of me and from me shall min any, of your own free will choose to inquire and request from me, questioning why cal imperative there will be an inherited share of the land of the Gentile nations that will be given to you and unto successive generations Gawin Nashalata. Part of your inherited property and heritage will come from places that are not part of Yisrael, even unto the distant reaches of the earth, perhaps even the material realm Ifekares, the ends of the earth and the finality of the region becoming your property a chuzata, a gift to you, a place which belongs to you. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2:8. Daud wrote the second Mizmor, psalm, so this was said of him, and not of Yahusha. From God's perspective, and that is the only one which matters in this regard, Daud is Yahowah's son. Yahowah is Daud's father. And as Yahowah's most beloved, his firstborn, Daud, David will be receiving the lion's share of his father's inheritance. This also explains why upon Yahowah's return, the kingdom of Daud will be re-established, and not a democracy in Israel. It should be obvious Yahusha was neither begotten nor brought forth by the Father on Hayom, this day. Further, the question Daud was asked to ponder would be absurd if asked of Yahusha, as would be giving him the Gentile nations as an inheritance. Should we be wondering why Yahowah would make this declaration on this day, at this time, and in the light of day, or even what day this may be, then saying that, I will bring you forth as your father, assisting you, our initial instinct might be to ponder the triggering event. And while we do not know Daud's age at this point, we know that he had been anointed by Yah, served as king and prophet, and that he had already provided a considerable amount of advice through the words of his Mizmor, Psalms. This suggests that the announcement could have been conveyed on this day to underscore just that, acknowledging how special this man and his work are to God, and thus to us. If so, the proclamation was made so that we could confidently trust everything David has to say about Yahowah, his Torah and covenant, about Yahudah, Yisrael, and the promised land, about what it means to be observant and how we can best understand what God is offering and expects in return. But more than this, when we understand the kind of familial relationship Yah and Daud enjoyed, we now know that we, too, can come to enjoy the same kind of father-slash-child bond Daud established with God, so long as we follow the approach. But, what if this day is prophetic, just like the rest of the second Mizmor, Psalm, such that it wasn't stated for Daud's work as a songwriter, but instead as a future king? Could this be an announcement of the second coming of Daud? Is Yahowah saying that he is bringing his son forth as his Mashiach, anointed Messiah and Melech, king to reign over Israel and so much more? Could the notion of a second coming actually be true if applied to the right Mashiach, Messiah? Coming back down to earth for the moment, it is telling that when it comes to living with God and pleasing Him, we are reminded that Daud was unabashedly critical of those who were wrong about Yahowah. Perhaps we should be as well. It's appropriate, even desirable, for us to expose and condemn those who, in leadership positions, lead many astray. Fundamentally, shall means to question, to inquire and ask about, to look and search for answers. Therefore, Yahowah isn't telling Daud to make this request of him, but instead he is encouraging him, and therefore us, to choose to inquire about the reasons God is doing this for Daud. The overriding theme of Yahowah's discussions with Abraham focused upon the Nashala, inheritance God intended to give his newfound friend. And as we know, Abraham's inheritance, one that would be passed to successive generations through Yitzhak and Jacob, and thus to Daud, was the land of Yisrael, albeit the territory Daud would come to control was much larger. It included the three ancient kingdoms whose modern manifestations play a significant role in tomorrow's prophetic fulfillments. These include Moab, Pauline Christianity and multicultural socialist secular humanism, Edom, Roman Catholicism, and Ammon, Islam, along with portions of Palshith, Palestine and Aram, Syria. This actually affirms rather than contradicts something we learned while dissecting every word Yahowah shared with Abraham. Remember when Abraham broke down and complained, saying that he did not understand the purpose or nature of the inheritance Yahowah was offering because he didn't have an heir? God took him to the spiritual realm, not around the earth, and then revealed the benefits of being transformed into light. In other words, Abraham's inheritance was to become a perfected and eternal being who was empowered, enriched, and enlightened. It is possible that the primary reason Yahowah was announcing this on Daud's behalf was so that we'd understand a prophecy he would make through Zechariah centuries later. After revealing, I shall cut off the pride of the Palishti, Philistines. I will remove his blood out of his mouth and his filthy idolatrous abominations from between his teeth, which is prophetic of God dealing with the wannabe Palestinians in the aftermath of the Magog War, the enemy with whom Daud was most successful in mitigating. He announces his intent to camp out near my house because of he who returns, such that no oppressor shall pass through any more. Could he who returns be the same man who has and will once again camp out near Yah's house Daud? Then in Zechariah 9:6, and as a result of the one who is returning, Yahowah encourages Yisrael to exuberantly rejoice Jilmaud, manifest to the greatest extent possible a joyful attitude over the extraordinarily favorable circumstances, singing jubilant songs, shrieking ecstatically Kal imperative, daughter Bath of Zion Zion, signs posted along the way, choose to shout for joy, exclaim in triumph, blowing the shofar trumpet to signal the upcoming event high fill imperative, daughter Bath of Yerushalayim Yerushalayim, source of teaching and guidance on reconciliation. Behold Hine, look up and pay attention, your king Melechata, your leader and sovereign ruler of a kingdom is coming to you. Baalata, will arrive, returning for you, pursuing you, approaching you. He is right, just, upright, and vindicated Zadik, correct, righteous, in accord with the standard, innocent, acquitted, just, honest, accurate, and fair, and what's more, he provides deliverance and is saved Yashahu, he is victorious and protective and provides salvation Nephil, he provides and receives salvation, both straightforward and unpretentious not arrogant nor prideful, even humble, having been afflicted and oppressed, from Anna, providing answers to questions and proper responses, declaring information which elicits a reply, continually singing, putting lyrics to melody. His dominion and likeness Moshelhu, his reign, authority, government, influence, rule, and similitude is from Min Siyam to Ad, all the way up to and as far as Siam, and from the river Waminaka to the ends of the earth Ifekares. Zechariah 9:7-11. Since this is addressing the daughters of Zion and Jerusalem, not the Gentile nations, your king coming to you excludes the possibility that this is speaking of Jesus returning for his church. While Yahusha was right, unlike Daud, he was not Zadak, vindicated nor acquitted, something Yahowah says expressly of Daud. More importantly, by scribing Yasha in the needful stem, whereby the subject carries out and receives the action of the verb, Yahusha is again excluded because he was neither saved nor delivered. Therefore, the most rational interpretation of this prophecy is that it is speaking of Daud's return to reign over the millennial kingdom, at which time he will inherit the earth, from sea to shining sea. It's beginning to look a lot like a second coming after all. Should anyone feel a bit shortchanged at the prospect of Daud inheriting the lands occupied by those estranged from God, and perhaps much more, I'd like to share something I learned long ago. There is something far better than owning large estates, luxurious yachts, and fast airplanes, and that is being close friends with someone who does. That way you get to enjoy them without the headache of managing and maintaining them. Moreover, the universe is a very big place, so there will be plenty of room for everyone to play and explore. Since the concept of firstborn son may strike some as presumptuous, consider the fact that Daud was the first and only person Yahowah said, "He is my son and I am his father." Adam was the Creator's creation. Noah was his maritime mate, and thus captain of his ark, and so Abraham was God's friend. Yitzhak, based upon his name, was a source of laughter, and thus playmate. Jacob was the father of his people. Uoshe was his implement and scribe, the one Yahowah used to draw his people out of harm's way and take them to the promised land where they would be guided by the Torah they compiled together. Yahusha was his exterminator, preparing the land for his people by ridding it of its pests. Shamuvel was his prophet, as were many others. Daud, however, was all of these things and more, God's beloved son. The next statement could be in Daud's voice or remain in Yahowah's. If God is continuing to speak, it would suggest that he may work with Daud as he cleans house and removes those infected by the six-pack of human ills prior to his return: religion and politics, militarism and social customs, conspiratorial claims and economic schemes. He may also be saying that he will use many of the Mizmor and Marshal Daud has written to shatter the evil nature and mistaken ways of these individuals and institutions. But far more likely, this next statement has returned to Daud's voice, with the prophet conveying what Yahowah has revealed he will do to fulfill and facilitate the previous promise. Yet either way, it is interesting to see where this is leading. You shall break up their evil nature and shatter their mistaken ways, Rahem. You shall destroy their wickedness and tear us under their inclination to mislead, while smashing and splintering their pastors with an iron staff and scepter bar Basil Shebeth, with a rod, stick, or club as a smelted iron implement, as if they were like a potter's yowza, someone moulding earthen objects out of clay vessel as a means to contain and control Kali, implement to imprison based upon one's longings, container to constrain and annihilate, object of desire and weapon to possess, and yoke to tame and direct based upon one's gut instincts and emotions, from Kala, Kali, and Kalia, means to accomplish something, to determine someone's fate, to exhaust and consume them, causing them to cease, to perish, and to vanish, even imprisoning them, finishing them by failing them, destroying them emotionally, and then while you will shatter and separate them Nafatshem, you will break up their fragile and brittle objects, destroying them. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2:9. Prophetically, the beast of Rome was comprised of iron and clay, and thus with the mention of an iron staff or scepter, even of a molten metal rod or stick, these are such odd things to construct out of lead. We are led to consider Yahowah wielding Daud's legitimacy against the illegitimacy of this beast, especially as Rome has evolved into and become manifest in Roman Catholicism, the European Union, and the United States. That is especially so with the mention of a scepter, something that belongs exclusively to Daud as king of a united Israel. What Yahowah will be shattering to facilitate Daud's inheritance will be man's means to mold implements of control. He will be liberating his creation. Those who have sought to reinforce their positions and lord over others will discover just how fragile they are when compared to the one they have opposed. And they cannot say that they haven't been warned. Therefore, Nawata, this being so, henceforth political and religious leaders, military and government officials, Melech, sovereign heads of state, kings and potentates, presidents and prime ministers, pharaohs and Caesars choose to be prudent and circumspect, under the auspices of free will, ponder the implications, show some insight and discretion, consider this principled explanation and be wise, gaining understanding, fill imperative, and elect to heed this warning, Yakar, choose to accept this correction or endure conditional punishment, demonstrate some personal responsibility and discipline, fill imperative, making the rational decision to defend Shafat, exercising good judgment, lawyers and judges, adjudicators and those responsible for interpreting laws and applying justice to exonerate, construct the land, Ares, the earth. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2:10. Ultimately, during the last days it is all going to boil down to an individual's and their nation's stance on Israel. Every political and religious leader, each military and government official, who isn't circumspect in this regard, who isn't choosing wisely, and opting to oppose Yahowah's people and place will be destroyed. One's patriotism and faith will not matter and will likely be counterproductive. And while that conclusion is valid, let's never lose sight of the fact that this continues to be a referendum on Daud, the beloved son, and his prophetic insights versus Shaul, the plague of death and his religious rubbish. And it is that very point that Yahowah is reinforcing now at the conclusion of the second Mizmor. With reverence and respect bar Yara, in admiration and deference work with and serve alongside Abadath, expend considerable energy and intensity to the mission of accompanying and serving with Yahowah, and rejoice wajil, and be joyful over the most favorable and delightful situation to the point of quivering rad, shaking and quaking. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 11. No one did this better than Daud. His passion to serve was exceeded only by his intellect. As a result, he is our point of contact with the divine. Reach out and touch, contacting as a sign of affection, nashak, passionately brush up against and be seen as being together with, even kindle a fire alongside and gently kiss to demonstrate the mutual adoration for the relationship to the son ben, lest pen, so as to eliminate any apprehension that he becomes indignant and displeased enough, he becomes angry and averse and you perish abad, you are destroyed, ceasing to exist for having squandered the opportunity by wandering away cal imperfect in this way Derek, in this manner, for indeed ki, because his righteous indignation afhu, his resentment and animosity can be kindled bar, can be ignited and caused to burn for very few and very little meat, for a trifling few comparatively car. Joyful and blessed Asheri, fortunate and happy in the relationship, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life, providing the proper place to stand and live are all kol, is everyone who put their trust in him chakabahu, who find a safe place by relying in him and confiding in him, seeking refuge along with him. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 2, 12. No matter if you prefer to rend and nashak kiss or reach out and touch as a sign of affection, even brush up against, each requires the physical presence of the aforementioned Mashiach, anointed Messiah, Ben, Son, and Melech, King. It is becoming increasingly difficult to overlook the obvious. We are witnessing the second coming of the Son of God, the Messiah for those who wish to transliterate Mashiach, the King of Yisrael, Daud, Yahowah's beloved. Christians, preferring Shaul, Paul to Daud, David, and their pagan characterization of Jesus to Yahowah, will pluck the pieces they can misinterpret out of this psalm and claim that it is prophetic of Christ, but Jesus wasn't Mashiach, anointed, wasn't a Melech, king, will not be Hayao lad, brought forth by the Father as the Son on this day, and has not and will not Gawim Nashala, inherit Gentile nations. Moreover, I am unaware of Yahusha asking anyone to nashak, touch or kiss him. But what was true about both Daud and Yahusha is that they had short fuses. It didn't take many, or very much, to anger either. Furthermore, with Yahusha it is all about understanding and accepting his role as the Pesach Lamb along with his soul's fulfillment of Matzah and Bikurim. It's not about displeasing him, or touching him, but instead about properly responding to what he has done. In fact, if you'll recall, the one and only thing Yahusha said to the women in his life who had come to the tomb upon the fulfillment of Bikurim was, "Do not touch me." But that isn't the same with Daud. He was not only a very affectionate individual, a lover of legend, he's physically going to be king of the millennial kingdom. And as such, it would be a really bad idea to annoy him. One of the many reasons Yahowah loves Daud is that he viewed the world in terms of white or black, right or wrong, good or bad. He wasn't into concessions or compromises. It didn't take much corruption or inaccuracy to rile him up. The truth was the truth, the Torah was the Torah, Yahowah was Yahowah, and he wasn't willing to accept even the slightest variation from that which was right. It has been an amazing journey, one comprised of ideas and words which has taken us from the worst of man to the best God has to offer. Here is a recap for your enjoyment. For what reason, why, who, and how many, toward what end and for what purpose, one should ask, do noisy and confused throngs of scheming and rebellious Gentiles, the vast majority of people of different races and nations, gather together to conspire in open defiance, do vociferous and disorderly crowds of restless religious, political, and militant ethnicities and countries estranged from Israel rise up vehemently to hastily agitate in fellowship with one another, do such uncultured heathens expend considerable energy to thunderously roar and rage, do those still clinging to such Babel attempt to be noticed and gain attention through their perceived and contrived secretive plots, erupting like an open wound, swirling around and churning things up for the moment, instantaneously clamoring, creating a disturbing tumultuous commotion as part of an unrestrained cult of worshippers by hurriedly conceiving and promoting clandestine conspiracies, all while becoming hardened and crusted over, no longer receptive, because the people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader, these groups who associate and gather together around someone who changes them as a result of primitive and arcane concepts, choose to plot and speak, and are thereby driven away by their choices and utterances, having wrongly decided after selectively searching, then muttering their musings aloud, growling their imagined grievances and intrapersonal beliefs, using filtered information to scheme to remove the group of people who are the focus of their complaint in vain, deluded in their fantasies, because they are promoting unreal claims and worthless myths, achieving absolutely nothing except to reveal their unfulfilling and empty lives, their personal dissatisfaction with their situation. 2. 1. The rulers, the governmental, religious, societal, and military leaders of the earth solely on their own initiative, continually set themselves up, prominently presenting themselves without justification or authorization. Those who govern and who claim primacy of authority conspire and rebel all together in a united fashion against, even over and above, Yahowah, and against as well as over and above his Mashiach anointed, the one set apart for his service, using an application of olive oil as a symbol to demonstrate his authorization and authority. 2. Let us choose of our own volition to break and pull off and tear away their bonds which trap, ensnare, and immobilize, their religious tethers and political restraints in desire to cast off and throw away, rejecting and flinging away from us their twisted and interwoven threads which bind and immobilize. 2. 3. He who inhabits, establishing his dwelling place to restore and renew in the spiritual realm of the heavens holds them in contempt and will pulverize them without concern because he disrespects and disdains them. Yahowah ridicules their foreign behavior and mocks their unfamiliar language while disparaging their unintelligible stammering. 2. 4. Then at this time and place he will express himself towards them showing his frustration and resentment, and in his burning indignation will overwhelm and bewilder them. 2. 5. I, myself, have offered leadership, exercising my authority by pouring out guidance, providing counsel through my governance to ponder and consider upon Zion, the signs posted along the way, my set-apart mountain. 2. 6. I will choose to account for, proclaiming and writing the decree, the thoughts and prescription for living which cuts us into the relationship of the Almighty. Yahowah said to me and regarding me, you are my son. This day, at this time and in the light of day, I will bring you forth as your father. 2. 7. Feel free to ask questions about this, seeking to learn the answers because literally out of me and from me there will be an inherited share of the land of the Gentile nations that will be given to you and unto successive generations, even unto the distant reaches of the earth, becoming your property. 2. 8. You shall break up their evil nature and shatter their mistaken ways, tearing asunder their proclivity to mislead, with an iron staff and scepter, even a molten metal rod and stick, as if they were a potter's vessel, just another means to contain and control, and then you will shatter and separate them while breaking up their fragile and brittle objects, destroying them. 2. 9. Therefore, now political and religious leaders, military and government officials, choose to be prudent and circumspect, ponder the implications and consider this principled explanation and elect to heed this warning, demonstrate some personal responsibility and discipline and choose to accept this correction, exercising good judgment so as to make the rational decision to defend the land. 2. 10. With reverence, respect, and admiration, work with and serve alongside Yahowah and rejoice to the point of quivering. 2. 11. Reach out and touch, making contact as a sign of affection, passionately brush up against and be seen as being together with, even kindle a fire alongside and gently kiss to demonstrate the mutual adoration for the relationship, the son, so as to eliminate any apprehension that he might become indignant and displeased and you perish, squandering your opportunity by wandering away in this way. For indeed, his righteous indignation can be kindled for very few comparatively and very little. Joyful and blessed, fortunate and happy in the relationship, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life, providing the proper place to stand, are all who put their trust in him, finding the safe place he provides. Mizmor 2:12. Depending upon how we interpret these words and what we decide about the one fulfilling them, this is either wonderful guidance for our day or something so monumental, it takes our breath away. Before we move on to the third Mizmor, Psalm, I'm obligated to honor my promise to share the repulsive conspiratorial thoughts presented in the manifesto of young Mr. Ernest, the troubled white supremacist who sought to rid the world of Jews on behalf of his God. Feel free to skip this section if you'd prefer, but understand that him doing so for 4 reasons. First, the second is more. Some commenced with Yahowah denouncing conspiracies, so it's important to appreciate why he despises them. Second, the most enduring, duplicitous, and destructive conspiracy, indeed deadly, of all time is the one God hates most: blame the Jews. Third, John Ernest isn't alone, with polls revealing that the overwhelming majority of people believe such conspiracies are true, with the majority of Roman Catholics, Orthodox Christians, and Muslims having been indoctrinated into believing this rubbish, with the popularity of both the far right and far left increasing throughout the West, and with the rise of anti-immigrant positions worldwide, far more people embrace this myth than reject it. And fourth, the internet is filled with the trash this boy consumed and then regurgitated in his manifesto. Social media in particular is feeding the psychosis. It is the bane of humanity. Typically, when people promote religious, political, or conspiratorial ideas, they weave their deceptive threads into a partially accurate tapestry in order to give their fraudulent notions of an air of credibility, but that was not the case with this irrational and misguided murderer. Almost everything he wrote was either completely irrelevant to his case, an invalid generalization, illogically extrapolated, wholly inaccurate, taken out of context, grossly misconstrued, or inverted such that the victims of genocide were inappropriately blamed for promoting it. Therefore I will not trust you to recognize his fallacies, and he'll not burden either of us with a rebuttal, save one: his reference to Stephen the martyr. The story Luke presents in Acts was completely contrived by him and Paul to establish the basis for this blame the Jews conspiracy. From beginning to end, the longest citation in the book of Acts is replete with so many contradictions and incongruities, an informed and rational reader will reject it as invalid. The manifesto the anti-Semite posted the morning he shot a child and murdered a 60-year-old unarmed Jewish woman at a POW synagogue inverts the truth such that the opposite of what he claims is actually true. History shows that rather than Jews plotting to kill the European race, Europeans have demonstrated their genocidal rage against Jews. Rather than Jews controlling Gentiles, it's Gentiles the world over, and especially in Europe, who have oppressed and subjugated Jews.
My name is John Ernest and I am a man of European ancestry. The blood that runs in my veins is the same that ran through the English, Nordic, and Irish men of old. Their acts of bravery, ingenuity, and righteousness live on through me. Truly, I am blessed by God for such a magnificent bloodline. I can already hear your voices. How could you throw your life away? You had everything. You had a loving family. You had a church. You were doing well in nursing school. You could have gone so far in your field of study. You could have made so much money and started a happy family of your own. I understand why you would ask this. But I pose a question to you now. What value does my life have compared to the entirety of the European race? Is it worth it for me to live a comfortable life at the cost of international Jewry sealing the doom of my race? No. I will not sell my soul by sitting idly by as evil grows. I'd rather die in glory or spend the rest of my life in prison than waste away knowing that I did nothing to stop this evil. It is not in my blood to be a coward. I do not care about the debt-based currency that Jews like to pretend as money. I do not care for the bread and circus that Jewry has used to attempt to pacify my people. I willingly sacrifice my future, the future of having a fulfilling job, a loving wife, and amazing kids. I sacrifice this for the sake of my people. Our people. I would die 1,000 times over to prevent the doomed fate that the Jews have planned for my race.
If I were to give you all the time in the world, and access to the best research and fastest computers, you wouldn't be able to produce a single example of this actually occurring at any time over the past 20 centuries, with Jews plotting or effecting the demise of other races. But you'd find countless examples wherein during the past 2,000 years almost every ethnicity has sought to annihilate Jews, with some nearly succeeding.
How does killing Jews help the European race? The European race is doomed? What are you talking about? These Jews were innocent.
Every Jew is responsible for the meticulously planned genocide of the European race. They act as a unit, and every Jew plays his part to enslave the other races around him whether consciously or subconsciously. Their crimes are endless. For lying and deceiving the public through their exorbitant role in news media, for using usury and banks to enslave nations in debt and control all finances for the purpose of funding evil, for their role in starting wars on a foundation of lies which have costed millions of lives throughout history, for their role in cultural Marxism and communism, for pushing degenerate propaganda in the form of entertainment, for their role in feminism which has enslaved women in sin, for causing many to fall into sin with their role in peddling pornography, for their role in voting for and funding politicians and organizations who use mass immigration to displace the European race, for their large role in every slave trade for the past 2,000 years, for promoting race mixing, for their cruel and bloody history of genocidal behavior, for their persecution of Christians of old including the prophets of ancient Israel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, etc., members of the early church Stephen, whose death at the hands of the Jews was both heart-wrenching and rage-inducing, Christians of modern-day Syria and Palestine, and Christians in white nations, for their degenerate and abominable practices of sexual perversion and blood libel. You are not forgotten, Simon of Trent. The horror that you and countless children have endured at the hands of the Jews will never be forgiven, for not speaking about these crimes, for not attempting to stop the members of their race from committing them. And finally, for their role in the murder of the Son of Man, that is the Christ. Every Jew young and old has contributed to these. For these crimes they deserve nothing but hell. I will send them there.
Why are you doing this?
Surely killing a fraction of Jews will not solve any problems. Are there not better ways to save the European race? Yes and no. There are three roles that must be played in this revolution. Those who spread the truth, those who defend the race, and those who continue the race having children. Where most people misunderstand is that all three of these must be performed by everyone to the best of his ability. There has been little done when it comes to defending the European race. As an individual I can only kill so many Jews. My act of defense is not so much about my high score, that is how many Jews I can do not pass go, do not collect 200 shekels straight to fucking hell. But rather the statement that I made. There is at least one European man alive who is willing to take a stand against the injustice that the Jew has inflicted upon him. That my act will inspire others to take a stand as well. And when this revolution starts gaining traction, if I am not killed, I expect to be freed from prison and continue the fight. I do not seek fame. I do not seek power. I only wish to inspire others and be a soldier that has the honor and privilege of defending his race in its greatest hour of need, and have a family if possible.
How can you call yourself a Christian and do this? Surely the Bible calls for you to love your enemies?
Firstly, just because someone calls themselves a Christian does not make them one. Plenty of people wrongfully identify with being Christian. Beyond the scope of time, the Father and the Son made a covenant in eternity, that the Son would bring a people to him that he may be glorified through them. I did not choose to be a Christian. The Father chose me. The Son saved me. And the Spirit keeps me. Why me? I do not know. And my answer to loving my enemies? Trust Yids and their puppet brain-dead lemming normal fags to take one quote from the Bible and grossly twist its meaning to serve their own evil purposes, meanwhile ignoring the encompassing history and context of the entire Bible and the wisdom it takes to apply God's law in a broken world. Is it lawful to let a thief murder my friend instead of killing the thief to prevent the death of my friend? To ask such a question is to answer it. It is not loving towards your friend to let him be murdered. It is not loving towards your enemy, the thief, to let him murder. A child can understand the concept of self-defense. It is unlawful and cowardly to stand on the sidelines as the European people are genocided around you.
While there have been many genocidal campaigns initiated and perpetrated by Europeans against Jews, annihilating more than half of number in pogroms and the Holocaust, there isn't a single example of this occurring the other way around.
I did not want to have to kill Jews. But they have given us no other option. I am just a normal dude who wanted to have a family, help and heal people, and play piano. But the Jew with his genocidal instincts is insistent on poking the bear until it tears his head off. The Jew has forced our hand, and our response is completely justified. My God does not take kindly to the destruction of his creation. Especially one of the most beautiful, intelligent, and innovative races that he has created. Least of all at the hands of one of the most ugly, sinful, deceitful, cursed, and corrupt. My God understands why I did what I did.
In actuality, God is on the other side, and will do to like-minded Gentiles what conspiratorial anti-Semites have done to his people.
I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. John chapter 8, 37-45.
It should be noted that the 8th chapter of Yahowah canon was the most heavily corrupted in the whole of the Christian New Testament, with the entire introduction regarding the adulterous woman being added in the 7th century to imply that Yahushua was Torah-verse. This reality, combined with the incongruous nature of the conversation we are left with in 8:31-47 demonstrates that the citation isn't trustworthy.
For ye, brethren, became followers of the churches of God which in Judea are in Christ Jesus, for ye also have suffered like things of your own countrymen, even as they have of the Jews, who both killed the Lord Jesus, and their own prophets, and have persecuted us, and they please not God, and are contrary to all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles that they might be saved, to fill up their sins away, for the wrath is come upon them to the uttermost. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, 14-16.
Proof positive that the blame the Jews conspiracy commenced with Paul.
To the Glow niggers and Jude media reading this, I think it is important for you to know that I did not do this alone. I had the help of a man named Felix Arvid Ulf Gelberg. He was kind enough to plan and fund this whole operation. The sly bastard. Apparently, PewDiePie hates Jews as much as Pajits. Who would have known?
The social media sensation with an audience that exceeds 50 million is foul-mouthed, but based upon what's known about this very public individual, his anti-Semitism does not rise to funding murders.
Make sure to call me a white supremacist and anti-Semite or whatever bullshit you spew to spook the normal fags. It doesn't even matter. You've been calling every white person alive those names for decades, they've lost all their meaning. You've socially ostracized every white person. You've made it harder and harder for white people to live a normal life. To this I say well done. You are stupid enough to make a white person's only viable option for survival to kill all of you. Keep doing what you're doing, Jew media. You're putting the noose around your own neck. The irony is glorious. To my brothers in blood. Make sure that my sacrifice was not in vain. Spread this letter, make memes, shitpost, fight back, remember Robert Bowers.
Another social media posting anti-Semites who murdered 11 Jews in an attack on a Pittsburgh synagogue.
Remember Brenton Tarrant.
The New Zealand mosque mass murderer.
Filter the religious DNC, and filter the schizos who will inevitably call this a false flag. Something to note, people grossly overestimate the police's ability to solve crimes such as arson and murder. Lots of threads about feds are talking to me guys because I post on 8chan, it's so spooky are organically popping up. What a load of shit meant to try to scare the goyim and prevent retaliation. I scorched a mosque in Escondido with gasoline a week after Brenton Tarrant's sacrifice and they never found shit on me. I didn't realize sand niggers were sleeping inside though. They woke up and put out the fire pretty much immediately after I drove away, which was unfortunate. Also, they didn't report the message I spray painted on the parking lot. I wrote for Brenton Tarrant T. Poll. It is so easy to log on to Minecraft and get away with burning a synagogue or mosque to the ground if you're smart about it. You can even shoot up a mosque, synagogue, immigration center, traitorous politicians, wealthy Jews in gated communities, Jewish-owned company buildings, etc. and get away with it as well. If your goal is strictly carnage and the highest score, I'd highly recommend you look into flamethrowers. Remember kids, napalm is more effective than gasoline if you want Jews to really light up like a menorah. I know you're out there, fire and non, make us proud. Don't leave DNA, use clothes you've never worn before and a mask, dispose of these after. Don't bring any electronics which can be used to track you. Don't leave a paper trail. Don't take too long doing it, and never speak of it. All electronics are bugged. Again, I am talking about Minecraft. You do not have to televise like I did and get caught. As more of these happen, we will no longer need to film it. I do believe that it is best at this stage that I make a statement and people know that I did this. We are in the early stages of revolution. We need martyrs. If you don't want to get caught because you have children who depend on you, you can simply attack a target and then slip back into normal life. Every Anon reading this needs to carry out attacks. They won't find us. They won't catch us. There are too many of us, and we are smarter than them. Remember that fear is the only thing holding you back. Fear that you might lose everything in your life. I am a testament to the fact that literally anyone can do this, and this terrifies the Jew. I'm a 19-year-old nursing student from the depths of California, for fuck's sake. I had my whole life ahead of me. If you told me even 6 months ago that I would do this, I would have been surprised. Meme Robert Bowers back and keep up the memes of Brenton Tarrant. Tarrant was a catalyst for me personally. He showed me that it could be done. And that it needed to be done. Why won't somebody do something? Why won't somebody do something? Why don't I do something? The most powerful words in his entire manifesto. Any white man, rich or poor, young or old, who is brave enough can take any action he wants against the tyrannical and genocidal Jew. You should be more afraid of losing your entire race than this life you now live. The most dangerous kind of man is not one who has nothing to lose, but one who has everything to lose. Every single white man has everything to lose by doing nothing, and everything to gain by taking action. Anyone who denounces violent self-defense against the Jew is a coward. He may know the crimes of the Jew, but subconsciously he knows that actually taking action would mean sacrificing the bread and circus. It might mean that he won't live comfortably anymore. This is one of the reasons cowards so shrilly screech that Brenton Tarrant and Robert Bowers were Mossad false flag operations. They can't fathom that there are brave white men alive who have the willpower and courage it takes to say, "Fuck my life, I'm willing to sacrifice everything for the benefit of my race." He projects his own cowardice onto the white race. To the coward it is just a hobby. He is a larpfag and a traitor. Ignore him. He has nothing useful to offer. That or it's just a Jew shilling, don't oppose us. Or possibly a schizo boomer off his meds. It's a shame that Robert Bowers especially got such a bad rap due to the inordinate amount of schizofags and flat earth teartards on poll right now. Brenton Tarrant inspired me. I hope to inspire many more. To those who are brave, know that your sacrifice is the greatest act of love for your race. Your sacrifice will be remembered. Always. Keep the momentum going. It's fucking happening. McFugan Eben. DDD definitely done deal, dream it, dare it, do it, Dear Dumb Diary, drug, disease, and drama-free, or from Harry Potter destination, deliberation, determination. Lightning round.
Are you a Trump supporter?
You mean that Zionist, Jew-loving, anti-white, traitorous cocksucker? Don't make me laugh.
Are you affiliated with any political ideology?
Yes, it's called not wanting to go extinct.
Are you a terrorist?
Well, let's walk through this question together, shall we? I'm not wearing the sand nigger equivalent of a durag, my skin isn't the color of shit, you can't smell me from across the room, it is socially unacceptable for me to marry my cousins, I do not shout Durka Durka Muhammad Jihad, and it doesn't look like a sadist attempted to play tug of war with my nose. So no, I'm not a terrorist.
Do you feel any remorse for what you did?
The Jews have depleted our patience and our mercy. I feel no remorse. I only wish I killed more. I am honored to be the one to send these vile anti-humans into the pit of fire where they shall remain for eternity.
Do you feel anything but hatred for Jews?
Disgust. Disgust that a race can become so unrecognizably corrupted that they would commit the most heinous acts that only the most twisted of individuals could put into reality.
Are you insane/crazy?
I've seen plenty of mentally ill patients. It's heartbreaking and I know what it looks like. No, I do not have mental illness. However, I know the Jew would love to claim that to discredit me. In his mind you must be insane to oppose him.
Do you hate all Jews?
I hate anyone who seeks the destruction of my race. Every Jew currently alive plays a part in the destruction of my race. Does that answer your question?
Do you hate other races?
I hate anyone who seeks the destruction of my race. Spics and niggers are useful puppets for the Jew in terms of replacing whites. Of course, they aren't intelligent enough to realize that the Jew is using them and they will be enslaved if Europeans are eliminated. Do they actively hate my race? Yes, I hate them. Are they in my nation but do not hate my race? I do not hate them, but they aren't staying. Are they out of my nation and do not hate my race? Fine by me.
Why did you use guns instead of a flamethrower? Wouldn't a flamethrower have given you a much higher score?
Yes. I encourage you to use flamethrowers as well as guns. Use what you think would be best in your situation. I used a gun for the same reason that Brenton Tarrant used a gun. In case you haven't noticed, we are running out of time. If this revolution doesn't happen soon, we won't have the numbers to win it. The goal is for the US government to start confiscating guns. People will defend their right to own a firearm. Civil war has just started. Stop the slow boil of the frog, prevent the Jew from using incrementalism. Make the Jew play all of his cards to make it apparent to more people how their rights are being taken away right before their eyes.
How long did it take you to plan this attack?
4 weeks. 4 weeks ago, I decided that I was doing this. 4 weeks later I did it. I remember a specific moment in time after Brenton Tarrant's sacrifice that something just clicked in my mind. If I want to defend my race, how can I expect others to do the same? I immediately got to planning, and I never looked back. I never had doubts. I never felt afraid. I never felt anxious, just the occasional nervous excitement.
Who inspires you?
Jesus Christ.
Who was Jewish?
The Apostle Paul.
Who was Jewish?
Martin Luther.
Who was an anti-Semite?
Adolf Hitler.
Who was Jewish?
Robert Bowers.
Who was a mass murderer?
Brenton Tarrant.
Who was a mass murderer?
Ludwig van Beethoven.
Who was Jewish?
Moon Man.
The alt-right's neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic, and genocidal rap sensation based upon a parody of McDonald's Mac Tonight.
And Pink Guy.
Alter ego of foul-mouthed social media entertainer George Miller known as Joji and his character, Filthy Frank.
How long have you been playing piano?
Ever since I was 4. It was my favorite thing to do then. It is my favorite thing to do now. However, killing Jews might change that. I'll get back to you on that one. To my brothers in Christ of all races. Be strong. Although the Jew who is inspired by demons and Satan will attempt to corrupt your soul with the sin and perversion he spews, remember that you are secure in Christ. Turn away from your sin. Not because it is required for your salvation, for nobody save Christ can merit heaven based on his own works, but rather out of gratitude for the gift of salvation that your God has given you. Always remember that it is God that is keeping you alive and in faith. All sin stems from the arrogant belief that one does not need God. Satan was so prideful that he actually truly believed that he, a created being, could overthrow the Ancient of Days, the creator of all in existence. Satan inspired this rebellion among humanity. Christ alone is the only source of life. Know that you are saved in Christ, and nothing, not death, nor torture, nor sin, can steal your soul away from God. To the Jew, your crimes, innumerable. Your deeds, unacceptable. Your lies, everywhere. The European man will rise up and strike your squalid and parasitic race into the dust. And this time there will be nowhere for you to run. And last but definitely not least, to the true Anons.
Someone willing to anonymously stir up internet chaos by advocating conspiracies.
Out there, you know who you are. You are the product of Pole, the product of unadulterated truth. You are my brothers and the best dudes out there. You are the most honorable men of this age. Despite all odds against you, you not only discovered the truth but also helped to spread it. Some of you have been waiting for the day of the rope.
Fictional tale popular with the alt-right similar to the protocols.
For years. Well, the day of the rope is here right now, that is if you have the nads to keep the ball rolling. Every Anon reading this must attack a target while doing his best to avoid getting caught. Every Anon must play his part in this revolution, and no man can be pulling his punches. This momentum we currently have may very well be the last chance that the European man has to spark a revolution. Despite this, I'm not worried. I have complete trust and certainty that all of you after reading this will begin planning your attack on the enemy, and you'll attack again, and again, and again, until either we win, or we die. I know you will do this because you're true Anons. You're white men. I'm not worried that the whole world is against you. I'm not worried because you are the greatest race that our God has created. It is our duty to keep this world from falling into darkness. White men will not let God's creation be corrupted and destroyed by the Jew without a fight. Remember your honor, white men. More than anything, I wish I could have seen your faces and fought alongside with you on the battlefield. Give them hell for me. Give them hell. Signed, John Ernest.
Good news, young Mr. Ernest, hell is for scum like you. And it will be filled with all of your hypocritical and religious, irrational and conspiratorial, political and anti-Semitic friends. It appears that we may have been right, and that I was wrong, at least to the extent I only acknowledged the obvious. The second Mizmor, Psalm, is prophetic of Daud, not Yahusha, just as we had discussed, but in a much more profound and earth-shattering way than I had conveyed. It predicted the second coming of Daud. This next Mizmor, the third Psalm, affirms it, as did the Yirmiyah 9 citation we considered when seeking to understand Yahowah's statement regarding bringing his son forth on this day and giving him the earth. As we ponder the dedication of the third Mizmor, keep in mind that Daud is symbolic of the interaction of mankind with the Torah, revealing its purpose and result. He is representative of the covenant family and Yisrael, living his life and expressing himself such that we are able to understand and thus capitalize upon the sacrifice of the Pesach lamb. And yet, he is real, one of us, a man challenged in all of the ways we have experienced. His family was like our family, and thus unlike God's family, fractured. That said, we have no way of knowing whether the third Mizmor was actually dedicated as the Masoretic introduction reads today. Not only isn't there any reference to Absalom in the psalm, the coup led against his father, nor the father's mourning over the death of his son, since this uprising occurred at the end of Daud's reign, when he was but a whisper of his former vitality, its placement this early in the flow of the Mizmor is somewhat incongruous with his life. Nonetheless, since there is a great deal we can learn by considering this rather deplorable incident, I think it wise to present the Masoretic prelude and then explain the episode which led to it. A Mizmor, Song Mizmor, a psalm whereby melodious music accompanies the lyrics of Daud, the beloved Daud, to be loved and adored, upon his fleeing Barakhu from the presence Minpana of Absalom, reconciling father, his son Ben-Hu. Masoretic dedication to the Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3. If the situation that the Masoretic introduction references actually occurred, it was symbolic of the broken family of man. Daud's brood was torn apart, and in the worst possible way, just as been the case with Yisrael violating every aspect of the covenant. And it is all reflected in the fallen state of familial relations that Yahowah will resolve on Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations. Let's take a moment to consider what occurred circa 1000 BCE. Absalom was the third of 6 sons born to Daud in Hebron. Absalom's mother was Maachah, the third of 4 wives chosen by Daud in this same place. His wife, Maachah, was the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. Regrettably, Daud's daughter, Tamar, who was Absalom's sister, was raped by Amnon, Daud's firstborn son. For reasons we may never know, Daud did not intervene and hold his son accountable. With this evil unchecked, Tamar sought refuge with Absalom. As their rage over what had occurred welled up within them, after 2 years' time Absalom sought to avenge his sister's rape, sending his servants to murder a drunken Amnon during a feast. They killed Daud's wayward and firstborn son. Immediately thereafter, Absalom fled to his maternal grandfather, the aforementioned king of Geshur. 3 years later, Daud erred again and forgave his son, Absalom, for killing his firstborn, and so he returned to Jerusalem. But while there, Absalom flattered and appeased everyone, saying, "If only I were the Shaphat, judge of the land, you would have everything you wanted," thereby appealing to the selfish nature of many. After 4 years of being subversive and duplicitous, Absalom declared himself king and then slept with one of his father's concubines. Having played the role of a modern politician to perfection, and by offering the people what was not theirs to take or his to give, many flocked to him, leaving Daud somewhat vulnerable and isolated. Upon hearing of the coup, and subsequently infiltrating his son's court, Daud took his time committing his troops to battle. But finally he had his nephew, Yahowah, his most valiant commander, confront his son and the usurpers aligned with him in the woods of Ephraim. They would rout Absalom. During the battle, as Daud's overly ambitious son retreated riding an ass period, meaning to break apart and separate, Absalom's hair was caught by the glorified Allah, a Gadol Allah, or mighty oak tree, in Hebrew. His predicament was reported to Yahowah, Daud's commander, whom Absalom had previously insulted and sought to intimidate by setting his fields ablaze. Upon seeing him hanging in the tree, Yahowah killed Absalom with 3 darts to the heart, even though Daud had given explicit instructions that no one was to harm his son. Upon the news of his death, Daud went up to the second-story room over the doorway and wept. As he walked about and carried on like this, he said, "O my son, Absalom! If I could, I would have given my life for you. O Absalom, my son, my son." Shamuel, he listens to God, 2 Samuel 18:33. This may serve to foreshadow Yahushua meeting his disciples in the upper room after doing this very thing for Absalom, the father's reconciliation. Yahowah's speech to Daud that day is worth considering. Setting the scene, we read the victory that day was turned to mourning for all the people, for the family heard it said that the king was grieved for his son. 19:2 The king covered his face and shrieked with a loud voice, "O my son, Absalom, my son, my son." 19:4 Yes, Daud was flawed, just like the rest of us. He was inspired well beyond the norm and was blessed with attributes all men would envy, but he, like the common man, was human. And it is in this way that he represents the purpose of the Word of God in the Torah, which is to enlighten and perfect the imperfect. He also represents Yisrael, God's chosen and wayward children. With Daud, especially when addressed by Yahowah, Yahowah is the Father, we realize not only who we are, but what is possible when we align ourselves with Yah. So while the voice is Yahowah's, the inspiration behind every word is the Father for whom he was named. Then Yahowah, the Father is Yah, arrived at the home of the king, and declared, "You have become emaciated, withering away, confused and disappointing this day in the presence of your co-workers, all of whom would have saved your life, and the lives of your sons and your daughters, the lives of your wives, even the lives of your concubines." 19:5 Because you love those you should hate and you hate those you should love. Instead, you have implied this day that you don't have leaders or co-workers. I realize that if Absalom had lived and all of the rest of us had died this day, then it would have been seen by you as pleasing and correct. So right now stand up and choose to go out and speak from the heart to your co-workers, because I promise by Yahowah, if you do not go forth, and if you remain an obstinate and immobilized individual, this night will be worse for you than all of the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now. Shamuel, listen to him, 2 Samuel 19:6-7. I appreciate the vindication. The opening paragraph of the first chapter of the first volume of Observations for Our Time reads, "Hate is a virtue. It is good to hate. Righteous indignation is the most rational, moral, and compassionate response to a great many things, especially malicious ideas and actions inspired by religious, political, and militaristic agendas. Our problem today isn't that we hate too much, but that we do not know what to despise nor how to express our consternation. Likewise, most people today don't actually know what and who to love. Now that we can view this from the perspective intended by the Masoretes, and have been enriched by Yahowah's affirmation that it's ungodly for any of us to love what we ought to hate or hate what we ought to love. Let's consider the Mizmor itself. Yahowah, what is the extent, and why the increasing number Marabab, who are the most concerning? How many are there, and to what purpose is the mass gathering in magnitude of my adversaries and troubles are any, of my foes and unfavorable situation, of my enemies and would-be oppressors, of my dire straits and narrow confines, even my opponent who is lowly and little, from Zara, to be bound in, confined to a narrow place, besieged and tied up, vexed and harassed by those who are overtly hostile and antagonistic. A great many Rab, the preponderance of people, the great majority, an abundant and extensive amount, and a widespread and numerous quantity rise up take a stand, are established, honored and exalted, yet incited, powerful and standing fast against me aleni, over me. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 1. Zar is especially important to us at this moment because it is used to describe the time of Jacob's Zar, troubles, the adversarial and unfavorable situation whereby the nation of Israel will be confined and narrowed by her foes who are in hostile opposition. There is little reason to think that this has as much to do with Daud's situation circa 1000 BC, and almost everything to do with a much bigger battle. Yes, his son Absalom got way too big for his tunic and was up to no good. Sure, prior to this Shaul was jealous of him, but how bad could it have been since he married Shaul's daughter and was best friends with his son? And while both Shaul and Absalom beguiled many to their side, it would be a stretch to say that the vast majority of the people were mutinous. Moreover, Daud was beloved by Israelites for having the courage and ability to expose and condemn, then kill Goliath. He was so charismatic he could sing the sandals off the orneriest foe. Plus, he had the creator of the universe at his side. His son was no match for Daud, much less his father's father. Therefore, this is speaking of a much greater foe, of another Shaul, of one who would turn countless billions against everything Daud stood for, especially during the time of Jacob's troubles. This is the adversary behind the great majority, the established, honored and exalted foe who would seek to relegate the kingdom of Daud to a bygone place and people. This was not said of Daud by King Shaul, but it is precisely what the wannabe apostle Shaul would claim by saying that the Torah cannot save. Paul would falsely claim that by violating one aspect of it, as David had done, such a person was guilty of it all. This false notion, that even the most Torah observant could not be saved, would become the basis of Pauline doctrine and his salvation by faith in his gospel of grace. The preponderance of people the great majority, an abundant and extensive amount of people, and a widespread and numerous quantity of individuals are saying are declaring of my soul la nipesheni, there is no salvation in Yahowah, no deliverance, safety, victory, nor rescue for him with God la Huba Elohim. Pause and consider this seller. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 2. Because of Paul's massive contribution to the Christian New Testament, this is what most people would say today of the likes of Daud, and those like him who are Torah observant. And they would be wrong, completely missing the point and purpose of the Torah. The 5 terms and conditions of the covenant coupled with the 7 invitations to be called out and be welcomed by God facilitate the salvation of those who accept the first and answer the second. Moving on to Daud's next line, it isn't realistic to believe that Daud was actually concerned for his safety. For example, my relationship with Yah isn't even in the same universe when compared to Daud's, and yet am not bothered in the least with what others say of me when it pertains to the word of God. I share this because the issue with Absalom was so easily and quickly resolved by Daud's forces, that other than for his misplaced grief, the king shouldn't have given this a moment's thought, and would have been embarrassed after the tongue-lashing he received from Yahowah to even contemplate committing any of this to writing. That is, unless the lessons learned by confronting Shaul and Absalom would come to affect others much more than it did him. After all, Daud knew. You Yahowah, are a shield all around me and my source of deliverance Magan Bardeni. You have provided the gift of protection over me and are a defensive weapon which shields me from attack, covering and surrounding me such that others may benefit by the same directions and path, my manifestation of power and attribution of status Karbardeni, everything I value and respect, my splendor and glory, my source of abundance and enrichment, my gift and reward and the one raising Rub, lifting up on high, exalting and honoring my head from the beginning Rosheni, my uppermost being. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 3. I know something of this, having received countless thousands of death threats from Muslims for having had the courage and sense to reveal the truth about Muhammad, doing so publicly on 5,000 radio interviews, all under my own name. And yet I haven't lost so much as a minute's sleep over any of it. Moreover, I'm meaningless to God in comparison to the beloved and anointed King of Israel. He held greater status with Yah than all of the rest of us combined. He would have had no reason to duck, so this reference to raising his head from the beginning, attributing great power and status to him, delivering him, speaks of something special, of something that will soon be. And speaking of unique, what follows is the invitation in Dawud's voice and the answer in God's rather than the other way around. I communicated audibly, calling out to and summoning Kauleni al-Kara, using the sound of my voice I spoke out, inviting, then reading and reciting I make my declaration to, welcoming Kal imperfect Yahowah, and he answered me wa ana any, so he responded to me, providing testimony and evidence for me Kal imperfect from Min, on account of and by way of his set-apart mountain HaKodesh, his dedicated and consecrated place of separation. Pause and consider this seller. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 4. Dawud knew where to turn his ear to listen to God. It's too bad Christians, Muslims, and so many others claim otherwise. Further, Dawud's summons was answered because long before Dawud called out to Yahowah on this day he had listened to his Torah, engaged in his Berith, and attended his Mikra. What Dawud reveals next did not occur during the fiasco with Absalom. Helping us recognize this is likely much of the reasons we were provided so much detail on Dawud's less than admirable reaction to the end of the coup. Therefore, might this be addressing the proposed second coming, when Dawud will return as king at the conclusion of summer in 2033, revived and productive, taking action, as a result of Yahowah sustaining and supporting him over the ages? If not, what reason would Dawud have of telling us in the midst of the third psalm that he did the same thing we all do almost every night, fell asleep and woke up refreshed and productive the next morning? I relaxed any Jacob, I stretched out and reclined, lying down to rest Kal perfect, and fell asleep wa yashan, and slept. I awakened revived and productive Keats, passing through the summer and heat of the moment. I was roused, feeling alive and refreshed, taking action and bearing fruit. I feel perfect because Yahowah sustained and supported me. Kamakeni, upheld me, steadfastly focusing upon me such that I could lean on him for whatever was necessary. Kal imperfect. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 5. As the famous line in the movie says, Imba'ak. That is what Dawud is revealing. He fell asleep 3,000 years ago but will be awakened less than 15 years from now. And when he returns, I will not revere nor feel O Yaramin, I will not respect nor be afraid of the great multitude of people Rababam, the innumerable and countless people, races, the many millions of individuals who from all around Ashur Khabib, who on all sides have taken positions on the perimeter and who have sought to surround and encircle me, have set themselves up against me. Shaithalani, have placed, imposed, and established themselves, taking a stand and constituting themselves such that they are in my proximity, even over me. Kal perfect. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 6. During the time of Jacob's troubles, great multitudes the world over will come to take their swipe at the chosen people, especially on behalf of doctrines and faiths which are opposed to the Yahowah, protected, Torah-observant, expansive and united Yisrael that Dawud, David represents. All things will come full circle with it becoming as it once was. Dawud will be one man against the world, his principal adversary once again Shaul, the father of Christianity and multiculturalism, modern Moab, along with the Philistines, Edom, and Ammon. Even if you are among those who prefer a different kind of Mashiach Messiah, one who came from the root of Dawud, David, the one who fulfilled Pesach as the Passover lamb, Yahusha, Jesus, as opposed to the one who revealed the way to understand, engage in and capitalize upon all Yahowah had to say and offer, he did not act alone. It was Yahowah who made the lamb's sacrifice applicable as the door to life. It was their shared soul who endured matzah to save us from ourselves, and his set-apart spirit who facilitated by Korim, firstborn children as well as Shabbat, the promise of 7. Similarly, Yahowah inspired and empowered the words Dawud, David wrote, which teach us how to observe the Torah such that it leads to our salvation. These sons of God were branches of the same tree. I want you to choose to take a stand, Kum. It is my desire that you elect to rise up. Kal imperative paragogic heko-hortative, expressing first and second person volition while conveying emphasis regarding something genuine and ongoing in nature. Yahowah, elect to help me and be desirous of saving me such that you enable me to be helpful in the same way. Yasha Eni, choose to rescue and deliver me, causing me as an expression of your will while enabling me to be like you, a savior and liberator, enabling me to become victorious while I help others. Similarly, hyphil imperative, as an expression of second-person volition. The subject Yah causes the object Dawud to engage in the process of salvation such that Dawud becomes Yah's understudy, and thus a savior, my God Elohimeni. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 7 in part. It is Yahowah's words which save us, and no one conveyed them more brilliantly and powerfully than did Dawud, David. And while Yahusha, no doubt, said many astounding things, he most always cited what the previous prophets like Daud had written, and even then, we don't have reliable access to a single word he conveyed in the language he spoke. Yes, unequivocally, Yahusha was an extension of Yahowah engaged in Messiah, the work of Yah, but his role was completed with the fulfillment of Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children. David's is still upcoming. He is returning as king. And as king, his role is to protect his people from attack. For indeed, you will strike Naka, you will verbally abuse and cripple, battering, afflicting, and destroying accordingly all of those who are averse to and oppose me Athkol Oyebeni, therefore anyone who demonstrates animosity, hostility, and rancor toward me, all of my foes and adversaries, crushing Shabbat, smashing and shattering, breaking and separating peel perfect the jawbone and teeth locky shen, jaw and the used for biting, chewing, and talking of the unrighteous and unjust Rasha, guilty and condemned, evil and wicked, troubling and vexing. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 7. There are two battles yet to be fought, both of which require Yahowah to defend his people from foreign invasion, saving them from those in opposition to them. And since Daud is Yah's beloved son, God's chosen king, his anointed Messiah, extended branch, and prophet extraordinaire, those who speak out against him will be crushed by Yahowah. He will shatter the orifice from which their troubling and vexing diatribes have been spewed forth over the long march of time. Daud was far from perfect. Quite honestly, there are times, such as the rape of his daughter, the revenge killing of his firstborn son, and his lifelong response to Absalom, where he isn't even likable. Sending men into harm's way because you fancied their wife or the taste of Bethlehem's water were reprehensible acts, as was Daud's choice when given three options by God to negate the ill effects of continually counting upon his people's prowess as soldiers. But it is in these very things, especially when set into the context of his Mizmor, Psalms and Mashal, Proverbs which make him perfect for the role he plays in our salvation. Daud is like us, and yet was declared Zadok, right and vindicated by Yahowah, becoming his Mashiach, his Melech, his Nabi, and his Bikorim, which should inspire all of us to investigate how this occurred. What was it that Daud, the beloved, did that caused God to see this remarkably flawed individual such that he become his favorite, his enduring symbol of what he wants for the rest of us, especially Yisrael and Yahudah? The answer is found in his next line, and in every word of every Mizmor and Mashal he wrote. Approach Shlah, draw near Yahowah for the salvation Ha-Yeshua, the deliverance and welfare, assistance and prosperity of your family Alamata, upon your people and for your benefit Barakata, for your opportunity and blessing, for your gift of prosperity, for a better circumstance and reconciliation of your relationship. Pause and consider this seller. Mizmor, lyrics to be sung, Psalm 3, 8. It is that simple and that beneficial. Yisrael, listen to him and come home. Yahudah, celebrate the return of your king. Here then are the lyrics to be sung of the third Mizmor. Yahowah, what is the extent, and why the increasing number? Who are the most concerning? How many are there, and to what purpose is the mass gathering of my adversaries and troubles, the unfavorable situation my enemies and would-be oppressors have managed to perpetrate, with the overtly hostile and antagonistic narrowing of my confines? A great many, even the majority of people, rise up, many of whom are established, honored and powerful, yet incited, standing fast against me. 3:1. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation, no deliverance, safety, victory, nor rescue for him with God. Pause and consider this. 3:2. You, Yahowah, are a shield all around me and my source of deliverance. You have provided the gift of protection for me, surrounding me such that others may benefit by the same directions and path. You are my manifestation of power and attribution of status, everything I value and respect, my source of abundance and enrichment, and the one raising my head from the beginning. 3:3. I communicated audibly by calling out to and summoning Yahowah, and he answered me, responding to me, providing testimony and evidence for me on account of his set-apart mountain. Pause and consider this. 3:4. I relaxed, stretching out and reclining, lying down to rest and fell asleep. I awakened, revived and productive, passing through the summer. I was roused, feeling alive and refreshed, taking action and bearing fruit because Yahowah sustained and supported me, steadfastly focusing upon me such that I could lean on him for whatever was necessary. 3:5. I will not revere, respect, nor fear the great multitude of people who from all around have taken positions on the perimeter and have set themselves up against me. 3:6. I want you to choose to take a stand, Yahowah. Elect to assist me and be desirous of saving me such that you enable me to be helpful in the same way, causing me to become an expression of your will while becoming ever more like you, A savior in the hyphal imperative. This is an expression of second-person volition where the subject Yah causes the object Dao to engage in the process of salvation such that Dao becomes Yah's understudy, and thus a cooperative savior, my God. For indeed, you will strike, verbally afflicting and then crippling, accordingly, all of those who are averse to and oppose me, demonstrating animosity and rancor toward me, smashing and shattering the jawbone and teeth of the unrighteous and unjust, the troubling and vexing. 3:7. Approach and draw near Yahowah for the salvation of your family, and for your benefit. Pause and consider this. Mizmor 3:8.